Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my compilation for the month of September 2021. Case file number 259, written by Absolute X in X Doubt, a dated glitch. I found out about this small British band when I was in high school, some 12 years ago. Back then, I used to listen to them primarily on YouTube because Spotify didn't exist, and they were small, so their music was hard to find to download. Anyway, fast forward to a few weeks ago, and I search up the song on YouTube. The video was still there, uploaded over a decade ago. The video only had 2 total comments when I clicked on it. Both comments were from that day, and both commenters remarked on the fact that they had just thought of the song and visited the video. I commented too and added that it was weird we all ended up there that same day for the same reason. Anyway, not sure if this is totally a glitch, but I didn't know where else to post this slightly strange occurrence / coincidence. Case file number 260, written by Big CL, When the Homeless Know Your Birthday. A few months ago, my significant other and I were out celebrating my birthday when 2 homeless drifters came walking along as we exited our hotel to the main street / sidewalk. One of the drifters looked directly at me and randomly said, "Happy birthday," as he casually strolled down the sidewalk. At the time, I wasn't wearing anything that could have indicated that it was my birthday, and I had not seen or come across those individuals in the hotel. My SO and I were, and still are, baffled and intrigued about the encounter. It could have been a coincidence for all I know, but the chances of that seem slim. I've been very skeptical about my encounter and considered the variety of possible logical explanations. I'm not attempting to convince anyone of anything. For context, I'd like to add that my SO and I were not the only people on the sidewalk. There were other groups of people walking about when this happened, so plenty of other people that this man could have greeted. These drifters did not seem to be in a typical headspace. They seemed to be in their own world. Part of me feels like chalking it up to just a happening of chance, but I really want to believe that the encounter was something beyond reason. Case file number 261, written by Elephant Shrewd. Entire hotel goes poof. In April, my friends and I went to San Francisco. I've been there personally many times, and I'm familiar enough with the city to know my way around to usual spots when visiting. This particular time we were staying at a hotel I had stayed in before, and we pulled up to check in, but there was no street parking because they were accepting delivery at the time. No biggie. We drove around a bit and about 15 minutes later decided to come back, except the hotel and the rest of the street had disappeared. Looking to our left down the street from the hotel originally, we could see Pier 1, a parking garage, and a public park area. We were facing down the road and could see those 3 things in front of us, meaning the hotel should have been to our left. Instead, there was just a convenience store. I drive down the road and loop back around to start at the same street, and it's still not there. We were all looking on our maps and we were right outside the hotel, well, where it was supposed to be, but it wasn't there. Suddenly, all our maps shut down and reset to our home city, and wouldn't load anymore. I don't know if it was a glitch in Apple Maps, but it was annoying because we couldn't find our damn hotel. Despite knowing we were on the right street in the same place we originally pulled up, it just wasn't there. We decided to go get lunch instead, and when we came back to the exact same spot the hotel had previously been, lo and behold, it was there. We really don't know what happened, but it was the weirdest damn thing. Case file number 262, written by Flafunk, Multiphasic Doggy. So this happened about 3 days ago. My girlfriend and I, 27 male, live together and we have 2 dogs. We have a sliding glass door that goes out to a small enclosed porch area, and this is where we keep our dogs' food and water bowls. My girlfriend fed the dogs and closed the door like she always does. One of our dogs is a spaz and won't eat unless we literally close the door and keep him out there. So she comes back in and sits on the couch, which is in the room by the sliding glass door. I'm sitting in a chair closest to the door where the handle to the door is directly to my left, and if I were to lean over far enough in the chair, I could probably open it. So this is where things got weird. After about 5 to 10 minutes, there was an abrupt noise, which was our dog basically wrecking through the blinds on the door and running back into the house. We have those tall vertical hanging blinds that hang from the top all the way to the floor. It startled me at first just because of how sudden it was, and since it was literally right next to me, I didn't think a whole lot about it until I looked back outside where my other dog was still eating, and the sliding glass door was still closed. What's even weirder is that we had the blinds pulled open a decent amount, so that when you open the sliding door to go outside, the blinds aren't in the way. So it's not even like he came in where the normal entrance of the door would be. It's like he phased through the middle of the door because that's where the blinds were pulled to, and that's how we noticed him coming in because the blinds were rocking back and forth. Also, in order to come inside where he did, the door would have to have been pulled all the way open. But it was completely shut. I looked at my girlfriend and said, "The door is still closed. How did he get back in?" That's when she noticed too, and her eyes got big, and we were just like, what the hell, for a good 30 minutes. I can't seem to come up with any explanation that makes sense. The door was completely closed, and even if it was cracked, which it wasn't, how would it have closed behind him? Or how do you explain the point of entrance he made, which was in the middle of the door? There was also no damage or dents or anything to the glass door. Case file number 263, written by Weenie Dogman. Boys and their secret elevator to Narnia. My wife passed away in 2011 from multiple forms of cancer. Towards the end of her battle, we were staying at an extended stay type of hotel near the hospital. It made it easier for us to get chemo and radiation without having to travel long distances. When we were walking down the hallway of this hotel, which many others had likely stayed at due to medical issues, we turned the corner. There were two young boys, both in swim-type clothing with a towel over their shoulder, probably 8 or 9 years old. They were about 50 feet in front of us. They approached the elevator and went inside. The doors closed shut, and we figured we would just wait for the next one. We walked up and pressed the button on the door, and it immediately popped open, with no one inside. There was no way it had any time to travel anywhere, and especially no time to return as well. We looked at each other in shock and couldn't fathom how this happened or where the boys went. It's bothered me to this day. Case file number 264, written by Wilfredo, 8090. Another bottle of H2O magic. I know it's not the craziest story, but my own personal glitch in the Matrix experience has me shaking for 6 years now. I was at my then girlfriend's house watching TV in her basement. I always bring a water bottle with me from home because her parents don't buy water bottles and their drinking glasses were always dirty with smudges. Anyways, we're watching TV and I reach down for my water bottle, which I always keep by my foot on the ground because there's no coffee table to put it on. When I reach down, I notice the bottle is gone. I look around thinking maybe it tipped over and rolled somewhere, but it's nowhere to be found. I don't want to be weird about it because it's just a water bottle. But I know it had to be by my right foot as it's where I always put it. I got up and just checked around the couch, but couldn't find it, which was just odd. It wasn't a big room and it wasn't dark in there either. It has become such a big ordeal that my girlfriend starts helping me look. We check the entire room before deciding to move the couch as it may have rolled underneath it. We do just that, but there's nothing under there either, so we move the couch back. Defeated, I sit down to think and notice that my water bottle is exactly right by my foot, where I left it last. I look at my girlfriend and her jaw drops. It was right there, but we turned the entire room upside down looking for it. The thing that baffles me most is I would have absolutely seen it if it was there the whole time. It must have reappeared when we finished our search. Still don't know how or why that happened. Bonus file, written by Aomi Noah. Beyond human knowledge. I'm a moderately typical teenager from Japan, male. Ever since I can remember, I have throughout my life had recurring encounters with some strange people, be it in terms of looks or behavior. These encounters can happen anywhere from a week's space to several months, and it always seems like when I do, it was their intention to meet me. My most recent one was on my way home from school. During my walk, I was looking down at my phone for a short moment, about to text one of my friends I planned to take over to my house later. As I looked up, a young man looking like he was in his 20s was approaching me a few meters ahead. This confused me for a minute, as it was a straight and fairly long path ahead. I thought to myself that, while I may have been looking at my phone, I would surely have noticed him coming from the corner of the path, a good length away, or at least I expected him to be closer to that corner. But there he was, approaching me from the middle as if he had appeared from thin air. His hair was dark brown, a bit unkempt, but still looking good, and he had green eyes. His clothes were fairly ordinary too, keeping a sort of laid-back summer style to it. The most remarkable thing about him was his tattoo, or mark per se, a black line running from his left chin and down underneath his shirt. As he got close enough for conversation, he stopped me and asked for my name. When I told him, he said he'd heard about me before. This confused me, as I'm not exactly a celebrity, but I thought nothing more of it. We then had some boring small talk, but he genuinely seemed pretty cheerful. Just as he was about to take off, he told me that I should probably wait for my friend. He didn't give me much of a chance to respond to this before walking off in the direction he came from. Weird. I thought about what he said and turned around to walk back to school. I glanced behind my back not long after, only to find that he was nowhere to be seen. As I made it back to my school, I sure enough found my friend waiting by the gate. She apparently thought we were going to walk to my place together, and had been waiting for me for quite a long time. I apologized and we began walking, and well, that's the end of it. I didn't tell her about the encounter, but I thought about it when she left. I didn't tell him or even hint about my friend at all, so how would he have known? These types of encounters have kept on happening throughout my whole life, sometimes very frequently, and I don't know why. These people I meet just seem too unreal, and usually know something I never told them about. Which leads me to believe these people aren't human at all, whatever they are. I'd like to know if someone might have some answers to who or what these people could be, and why I keep encountering them. Why me? Case file number 265, written by Avversario Casuale, twisting Tuesday into Wednesday. This happened today, Tuesday where I live. First, I was chatting with my grandma and she asked me if I had taken any medication I should take on Wednesdays. I replied that it was indeed not Wednesday. She insisted that it was, and that she had also just taken her medicine that she also needed to take on Wednesday. I had to show her pills package to prove it was in fact Tuesday. Alright, whatever, old grandma. Then I talked with my mom, and she was also convinced that today's Wednesday. I don't really remember how the topic popped up, something about her shifts at work. She instead said it was Wednesday, and wouldn't budge until I showed her the date on the phone. Weird, but okay. Then I'm going to the dentist. He's fixing my next appointment, and he asked me if I'm free to come in tomorrow. I agree, and I'm surprised that he's open on a Wednesday, since he's usually closed. He looks at me weird and says, "No, tomorrow's Thursday." Then he realizes that if it were, it would make today Wednesday, and he would be closed. He shakes his head and gives me my Thursday appointment. It feels like everyone is glitching, and they skipped a day, on the same day. Case file number 266, written by Coat Full of Owls. Time is unstable on Arizonian roads. To get from Phoenix, Arizona to Tucson, Arizona, it takes about 2 hours. And anyone who has taken this drive knows that there isn't much to talk about between either city. A few sparse towns mainly built around trucker gas stations, but that's about it. I've taken this drive many times, and usually before or after the town of Sunland Jin. Yep, that's the name, is where time seems to shift. There's honestly an odd feeling when you focus on it. And before I know it, I'm already coming into the outskirts of Tucson or Phoenix, 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes early. My memory doesn't contain me going past the usual markers, the nut farm, the big mountain, the ostrich farm, none of it. Arizona is an odd place in case you were wondering. The only feasible explanation I can come up with is some sort of portal, if you believe in such things. Where it's not like portals in all the video games or movies, where you can see it and things get all warped and trippy, but where it just happens. And I'm not the only one to have noticed it is the thing. People I've talked to, friends included, have also experienced it. You're driving and 1 minute you'll see one sign, you blink, and then the next you're coming into town. Am I the only one that has witnessed this more than once on a certain drive, multiple times? Case file number 267, written by the Skullduggery. Mother, the impostor. My mom used to work during the day and leave me home alone when I was around 12 or 13 and too old for daycare. She would ring the home phone periodically throughout the day and make sure everything was alright. One day I'm home alone and the phone rings. I pick it up. It's Mum. We have a short, succinct conversation that's basically, "Everything going alright?" "Yeah." "Okay, don't answer the door if anyone knocks," etc., etc. Very normal conversation. It ends, I hang up, and go about my day. Not even 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. I pick it up, and it's Mom again. We exchange hellos and I jokingly say, "Must be a slow day, you literally just rang me." And Mom goes very quiet for a minute and then says, "I haven't called you today." My blood went cold, and to this day I still don't know who called me. We came up with a secret password after that. Who was the impostor who sounded just like my mom? Or was this a delayed glitch? Bonus file, written by Altruistic Flight 226. When sheep start flying, it's time to run. About 10 years ago, I moved into a house. My husband worked nights, so it was just my 4-year-old and me at home most nights. The second day we were there, my husband built our bed. I fell asleep alone and woke up in the middle of the night to my bed violently shaking. As I'm laying there, afraid to move, I notice the handles on my dressers are flapping up and down. I was afraid for my daughter, who was in the next room, so I jumped out of my bed and ran to her room, but she was sound asleep. I was too afraid to sleep alone in my room, so I had my husband pull out a mattress into my daughter's room so I could sleep there. In between that first incident and the last, several unexplainable things happened. Ceiling fans would rotate one way, then stop and rotate the other way. My dogs would start aggressively barking at a corner of the living room. Things would go missing and then show up in plain sight. We would smell weird smells like old lady perfume or a strong smell of popcorn where the kitchen would have been in the 1970s. I would hear footsteps in the attic. One night I heard a TV turn on in the spare bedroom. I go to check it out and the TV is turning off and on, and then I saw a ball of light bouncing around the room. One night I had 2 friends over. We were sitting in the living room talking while my daughter played with a Little People's farm animal set. She had a sheep in her hand and set it down in the middle of the table. As she's walking over to us, the sheep flies off the table and slams into the wall. I begged my friends not to leave as I was terrified to be alone. The night before, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. My husband was off to work and we had fallen asleep watching TV. He had woken me up around 2 a.m. and told me he was going to eat a bowl of cereal. I went upstairs to my daughter's room, where I felt the safest, and still had my mattress on the floor. As soon as I close my eyes, I hear what sounds like her TV crashing to the floor. She had a lamp in her room that had a floor button, so I turned on her light super fast. When I turned around, I saw her closet door flying open so hard it hit the wall. My daughter woke up and we were both screaming. I left the next day and couldn't even go back into the house to pack anything up. I even had to break my lease. I told my landlord what happened, and it seemed like she already knew what was going on. She proceeded to tell me that any house can be haunted, new or old, and described how she couldn't even keep a babysitter in her newly built house. This house was not my first paranormal experience, or my last, but it was definitely the scariest time of my life. Bonus file, written by Smiley B. Powerful Fatherly Orbs. When I was 13 months old, I lost my father to some suspicious circumstances, possible murder. So unfortunately, I never got the luxury to have a strong relationship with him. However, I remember vividly his face, his laugh, and many memories of us playing together. Even stranger was that my memories are from the house my mother and I moved into after he passed in our old one. I remember playing games, tea parties, and even dressing up with him. But the oddest part was that the photos my mom took of me when I was playing with him, there would always be an orb next to me, the same color, shape, and size. My mom always thought it was a camera, but it was never in the same spot. Fast forward to when I was about 6 years old. I remember it was Christmas Eve, so I was excitedly waiting for Santa Claus to come. I just remember what felt like someone kissing me goodnight, and when I sat up excitedly to see whom I hoped was Santa, instead I saw this extremely bright light coming from the hall. Now my mother was laying in bed next to me, fast asleep, and we had nobody else in the house, but I just remember watching it in awe as it was a beautiful blue flash of light that seemed to open and then close. I remember writing it off as Santa leaving, so I excitedly woke up my mother to go open my presents. It was about 3 a.m. Now, obviously, as I got older and learned that Santa wasn't real, I questioned what I saw that night. It wasn't a car light, an electrical malfunction, or a TV that was accidentally turned on. And after mentioning it to my mother as an adult, I truly believed I watched him cross over. My reasoning? My mother told me in high school that she believed my dad's spirit was with me in the house. She said it was okay at first, but that she thinks he was playing tricks on her, like he did when he was alive. And hearing me talk to him all the time and seeing the orbs in all my photos began to freak her out. Well, it turned out that night, Christmas Eve, her best friend who had come for dinner had helped her cleanse the spirit away, and that after she did, I never mentioned my father or played with him again. My mother wrote off me seeing the bright light as my crazy childhood imagination, but as horrible as my memory is from my childhood, the feeling and image I got from that light that night has always felt so real and raw to me. I still remember the feeling of peace and happiness that washed over me when I saw it. And now, 17 years later, I believe wholeheartedly I watched my dad cross over. In my mind, that settles it. I really did watch my dad cross over. Bonus file, written by Yam Special 7425, Big Ass Black Mass. This could be nothing paranormal, but yet I'm curious if it is. It started 4 years ago when I met my friend. I lived in an institution type thing, and she moved there and we got along quickly. She lived in one of the institution's apartments, and I lived in the main building. We always hung out at her place, and I always felt, watched, or not alone in her toilet. I would rush out for no reason. I know I'm silly, but it was weird. One day I was changing in the bathroom when suddenly I walked out to my friend. No particular reason for it. The feels of the room just got to me, I guess. Then I walk out there again. She has a cabinet with magnetic stuff in the cabin, so you'd have to really use force to open it. When I walked to the toilet, it was open and I knew it wasn't open a minute ago. I turn around to tell my friend and take her to the toilet. Then it's closed. This is my first ever experience and we tried to do everything we could to debunk this. Anyhow, ever since when I'm with her, small stuff happens. The water boiler would turn on by itself. Somebody would turn off the vacuum when I use it, and so on. Now, I moved in with her several years later in another apartment in another city. When she's at work, I feel like I'm not alone, but I ignore it because I might be playing mind games on myself. But today, I saw something for the first time ever, and it caught me off guard. I was laying on my bed on the floor this morning. She was watching TV on the couch. Behind the couch is a door to the hallway, and to the right in that hallway, the entrance to the kitchen. I saw a big-ass black mass, no other word for it, filling about the entire top right corner of the doorway to the hallway. It moved, just as I saw it, towards the kitchen. I could not see through it. It was not a shadow. It was a black mass of something. I'm not scared personally, more fascinated. I don't know if this is even paranormal, but I don't know what it really is. Because it's not a shadow figure, you couldn't see through it. I figured some of y'all maybe could explain this further. Case file number 268, written by I Just Can't 555, Juice Replicating Itself. About 2 years ago, I had a strange experience that no one could explain. I own 2 retail pipe and tobacco vape shops. We were very low on a specific brand of vape juice, and customers were getting upset that their favorite flavors were out of stock. I should note that I only ordered this product from the manufacturer, and it is not carried by any of my distributors. I made orders for both stores and combined them to one list, then I placed the order to the tune of $6,000. When the juice arrived, my general manager split them up and checked in the product slated for store number 1, then put the stuff for store number 2 in a box to go there the next day. When she got to store number 2 the next day, she went to add the product to the point of sale system, and all of the products were already in inventory. Her first thought was that she accidentally put the inventory from store 1 into store 2. She checked store number 1, and the inventory was correct there. She then went to look in the drawers where we keep the juice, and it was already there. Keep in mind that we do not order this product from anywhere else, and the manufacturer did not get the list for store number 2, just a combined list. There's no way we could have received just the inventory for store number 2 separately. She then checked the bottle's dates of manufacture and batch number, and they matched the product that was in the box. Somehow $3,000 worth of e-juice duplicated itself. We spoke to every employee about it and no one had any explanation. No one had adjusted the inventory in the system, and no one had transported any product except for my general manager. It's still a mystery to this day. Case file number 269, written by Justin Wright 0803. When the effect happens before the cause. I'm a sales manager at a very well-known auto parts store. Our store is kind of on the smaller side, so we typically only have 2 people working at a time. We sometimes order parts directly from our vendors for customers, if they're for rare or classic cars, and thus we don't really need them in stock. When the parts come in, we call the customer to let them know they're ready for pickup. Today we received a call from one of our regulars. I answer and he says, "Hey, I just missed the 2 calls back to back from you guys. Are my parts in?" I let him know we haven't received our truck yet, and neither me or my coworker have made a call all day. I even checked the recent calls and verified no outgoing calls have been made since yesterday evening. He informs me he's on his cell phone and looking at the 2 missed calls in his log as we speak. We talk about how weird that is and then hang up. Within 5 minutes, his parts show up. I go to call him back, and after the first ring, accidentally, the call ends. I immediately hit redial, and as soon as the phone begins ringing, it dawns on me that I've just called him twice, back to back. He didn't answer, and I'm still wondering what happened. Case notes, file number 269. This is so cool. Striking me as the first time loop I've narrated in I don't know how long. It's almost a causality break. How in physics, if you can travel faster than light, which is really faster than the causal limit, you can trigger events out of sequence, where the effect is a cause or precedes it, not the cause creating the effect. Of course, this random dude didn't just accelerate to FTL. No. Maybe an Einstein-Rosen bridge? There are wormholes in physics. They're only theoretical math proofs, but still, what else could it be? Case file number 270, written by Kinetic Photography, Dad ×2. My dad worked a night shift at a big car company and usually came home around 1 to 1:30 a.m., 3 a.m. at the latest if he took a late night cruise. This took place on a Friday night. My friends were sleeping over and as tradition, we watched scary videos till we passed out. I'm half sitting / laying on the couch when I heard the door to the garage open and close, so I figured it was my dad. Sure enough, a few minutes later, he came down and said hi to everyone, and then went into my parents' bedroom and closed the door. The family room is connected to their room. I don't recall how much time had passed, but it had to have been at least 30 minutes to an hour when I hear the garage door open and close again. My adrenaline starts to pump because I knew my dad was already home, so who just entered my house? So I listened very carefully and heard him take his shoes off, unpack his lunchbox, etc. A few minutes later, he came downstairs and said hi to everyone just like before, and I just stared at him in confusion. "Didn't you already come home like an hour ago?" "No, I just got home. Why?" "I literally heard you come home and we talked to you." And then another friend also said, "Dude, what? That never happened." I'm not really sure what happened that night, but I know for a fact that I never fell asleep and that my dad came home twice that night, with friends as witnesses. Case file number 271, written by Stephanie Alice Smiles. 1 foot on pavement, another on grass. A couple nights ago, my daughter and I went on our 4th walk of the day. This was the only walk we took in the dark. We recently just moved 50 miles away from our hometown, and we have enjoyed taking walks and learning the new street names. A lot of the street names are people's names. Coming up to our street, there is a street with a break in the sidewalk. This is where things get weird. We're walking down this street, we've been down at least 20 times now, with the break in the sidewalk coming up to our street. Except there wasn't a break. It just stopped. The sidewalk didn't start again until our street. We both noticed around the same time that the sidewalk didn't start again. We walked up and down the street, super confused. We know there was a break, but for it to just stop entirely. We walked back and forth for a few minutes, completely mind blown. It isn't like the grass grew over for a night. The next day, of course, it was the way we remembered it, with a break in the sidewalk. This is definitely my first glitch in the Matrix. Bonus file, written by Queen Aurelia, Applying oil to an angel has interesting effects. I bought a painting at a thrift store of a beautiful young angel a few months ago. I was immediately drawn to it, which is not typical for me. I'm not into art or angels. I hung it up in my bedroom the same day I bought it. The next morning when I woke up, the living room lights were on. I thought that was strange, that I wouldn't have noticed I left them on when I went to bed. Since I can see my living room from my bedroom, I wouldn't notice if the lights were on. The next night, I made sure they were off when I went to bed. Sure enough, the next morning they were on again. Same thing happened the next night. This time I woke up around 3 a.m. and could see from my bed the living room lights were on again. After that third night, I never had an issue again, so I chalked it up to some type of electrical thing, and it was a coincidence with the painting. Although the lights never turned on automatically during the day, just while I was asleep. Then, just the other day, I was in my bedroom putting laundry away and the painting started swinging. Like, it was very, very noticeable. I just sort of stared at it, watching it, and then it just stopped. Nothing could have hit it. There were no breezes or drafts. It was really, really swinging. Not sure what to think. I don't get a bad feeling from it. I should mention, I live by myself, so no one could have turned the lights on after I went to bed or moved the painting. Bonus file, written by VGN Trickster. 2 men in suits observing through the window. My sister had moved to the city my best friend and I were living in, and she was staying on our couch. It was summer and really hot, and we had air conditioners in our bedrooms, but not the living room. Sometimes she would sneak into my room and sleep in the bed with me when it just got too hot in the living room. One night I woke up around 3 a.m. and was having trouble falling back asleep. I was having a lot of anxiety. Then my sister came in and got into the bed. I figured she was just hot, so I didn't say anything. For some reason, my anxiety increased. I kept saying in my head, "She's scared. There's someone in the house. I feel like she's scared and there's someone in the house." So maybe after 5 minutes I said out loud, "Did you come in here because you're hot?" And she said, "No, I heard glass break in the kitchen and got scared." I jumped up and was like, "Did you investigate?" And she said no. So I got up and was like, "Jesus, someone needs to investigate if you heard glass break." I exited my room and my dog, a big Akita mix, followed me. I walked throughout the apartment and didn't see anyone, but I kept feeling like someone was in there. I checked behind furniture, opened closets, cupboards, literally everything, but there wasn't anyone around. I went back into the bedroom and laid down and told her I didn't see anything or any glass, but I couldn't stop feeling like someone was in the apartment. I was tossing and turning and couldn't stop thinking about it. Eventually, my sister got up and left, and I heard her enter my best friend's room. I assumed my tossing was keeping her up. The next morning, they both had gone to work, and I was still a little on edge, so I checked my best friend's closet and room before heading to work. At some point in the day, my sister messaged me and said, "Something weird happened last night in your friend's room." I was like, "What?" And then she said, "He was talking in his sleep, and it sounded gibberish, but scary, like he was speaking in tongues. When he woke up, I told him, and he said that was weird, because he had a dream I was laying there in bed, speaking in gibberish, and he got up and opened his door, and you were in the living room in the dark, searching for something, and there were 2 men by the windows in suits with hats watching you." I essentially shit my pants. That's when I told her everything. I told her I was anxious before she'd come in. I felt like someone was there. Then I reminded her of the similarity, that I was investigating and was searching around last night. We both freaked out. Apparently, she left my room because she thought I was annoyed she was there, and that's why I was tossing. I told her that wasn't it. I felt like someone was in the house. We told our best friend, and we all freaked out. It was a really weird shared experience to have. Nothing at all happened there before that, and nothing has since, as we still live there. No clue what that was. A weird visitation, I guess. Case file number 272, written by Diverts. UFOs 3 ways. I had the exact same experience when I saw a UFO on 3 separate occasions. First occasion, I was at a bonfire with about 12 other people. I looked up at the sky to see a light zooming around in a way that a plane could absolutely never do. Hard stops, retrace the path, instant turns. And a light on it that was blinking in 3 levels of intensity, in descending order. bright, medium, dim, bright, medium, dim. I pointed this out to my friend sitting next to me, skipping conversational details here for length. I spent around 10 minutes pleading with him to just look up, but it was so bizarre. It was like he couldn't hear me, despite being a couple feet away. When he did hear me, he would respond monotone and disconnected from his normal self. I walked around and asked every person to look up. Just tilt your head and look up. And everyone was the same. Nobody, not once, even moved their head to just look. Everyone had the same disconnected attitude and seemed like they couldn't hear me. Later in the night, at around 4 a.m., my friend suddenly remembers what I was telling him and couldn't explain why he wouldn't look up. All he remembers was me trying to get him to look up like he was in a dream. Second occurrence. Outside smoking a cigarette with a friend at like 10 p.m. We're near a city, so the light pollution is pretty high. I look at the sky and again I see that same light with the same sequence. It's still very distinct and I point it out to him. He looks over at it but doesn't say anything. I'm trying to talk to him about it, but he never said a word for the entire cigarette break. We had been hanging out for a few hours, so I know nothing was wrong. It gave me the same feeling of disconnectedness as before. 20 minutes after we get inside, and he remembers it and starts freaking out about what we just saw. He can't explain why he was acting that way. Third occurrence. I got locked out of the apartment with my girlfriend at the time. My brother was off of work in an hour to let us in, so we're just hanging out. Then I see it again. I point to it and say, "Look at it." She never looked, never said anything, never spoke while we were out there. Brother lets us in and I'm telling him about it, and then she says she doesn't know why she didn't look. No one knows why they won't look. And it was the same pattern, the same disconnect. All of these happened over the course of 8 years. I guess roughly every 4 years. I'm just baffled by this. Only told this to one person before, but another story I read on here motivated me to share it. Edit. Each time I watched it until it was gone, and each time it departed the same way. Its light pattern seemed to change. Bright mid, dim to mid, dim, blank. Then after a minute, dim, blank, blank. On the third time, I realized this is probably what it would look like as it's getting further away. The bright became mid, and mid became low, and then low was blank at a distance. Then at a greater distance, only the bright was visible, but that was dim. Then it was just gone. Case file number 273. Written by Most Champion. Typing to Spooky. It started a week ago roughly, and has happened multiple times. First off, I want to mention that I live alone and don't have any pets. Last week I went to sleep around 2 a.m. and had my MacBook Pro closed, completely, on the floor. While I was in the bed, I started to hear typing on the keyboards. It wasn't cracking or anything like that, it was just typing, and I'm not imagining it at all. It lasted several minutes and then eventually stopped. I freaked out like crazy that night, but eventually managed to fall asleep. The next day, I also went to bed late. I fell asleep and woke up in the middle of the night by the typing noises of the keyboard. It wasn't a dream, nor am I crazy. It really happened. I was very scared, so I turned on all the lights and the typing stopped. My computer was still closed, shut down. So I turned off all the lights and 10 minutes later, I heard the typing on the keyboard again. This time too, it lasted for a lot. I almost had a panic attack. Keep in mind, again, I live alone. It happens again other nights. Every time it happens after I go to sleep. It can be right after I go to sleep and put the MacBook down, or many hours later in the early morning while I'm still asleep. It never happens while I'm using the computer myself. Last night I couldn't sleep because I heard weird noises coming from the window. Like some weird gush of wind, loud noises around my windows, and of course, the typing on my computer. I'm honestly terrified. What can this be? It doesn't make any sense. I was thinking I'm either spied on by some agency that managed to infiltrate my computer and search for something. But what? I have nothing to hide and I'm a completely average guy. Never committed any crime whatsoever. And even then, if the computer is closed, how can I hear the typing? I mean, even if they infiltrated, I shouldn't hear typing on my keyboard. Or is it something paranormal? I read that I'm not the first guy who's heard typing of a keyboard at night, and other people who experienced it were equally frightened. Some of them used a mechanical keyboard, which is exposed at night. I have a MacBook Pro, and my keyboard isn't exposed because at night I close my PC. in the sense that I shut the screen above my keyboard so it's not exposed. There's nothing to type on. Bonus file, written by also no name. Mimic casts deception. Child resists. When I was about 8 or 9, can't remember the exact age, I visited my relative's apartment with my mom. My father bought me a cute doll from overseas and I wanted to show it to everyone in that household. While my mom was talking to the relatives, I decided to visit their neighbor's apartment. I knew them well and had been to their place many times. I went to that flat and greeted some family members sitting in the living room. I then took the stairs to go to the upper floor. I remember the upper floor was dark and the only light was coming from the veranda. I saw 2 family members sitting and talking. I went to them, showed them my doll, and walked back to the dark hallway to reach the stairs that would then take me back to the first floor. That's when I saw a woman walking into the room at the back of the hallway. From the back, she looked so much like one of the women who lived in that flat. I thought of following her into the room as I wanted to show her my doll. Before I entered that room, I became very scared for some reason. Part of the reason may be because the room was pitch black and I was confused why she wouldn't turn on the light. I was worried she might hide in the corner trying to jump at me in the dark, so I decided not to go into the room and went downstairs, only to find that same woman in the kitchen on the first floor. I didn't see her on my way in, but she had been downstairs all along. I told her what I saw upstairs and she exchanged a funny look with another family member and just brushed me off. By the way, there were no guests in the house. I don't know who I saw. I told my mom about it later too. She also brushed it off, but I later overheard her talking to my dad about some funny things going on in that apartment after they brought in a harp-like musical instrument. My mom said they would hear someone playing the harp at night, and when they checked, the sound would stop. I've been intrigued by mimic stories, especially because of this childhood experience. This is the one and only encounter I have with anything paranormal. From where I come from, there are beliefs and warnings about mimics. For example, hikers and hunters are told not to call each other by their real names, as mimics can lure them to make them lost by calling their names in the voice of someone they know. They could also trick you by looking like your friends and make you follow them. Do you have such beliefs in your country? If you have similar stories to share, I would like to hear them. Bonus file, written by Slap My Big Toe. This picture proves the afterlife. For some context, my dad passed away at the very end of January this year. I suspect it was an accidental overdose because of his substance abuse issues, but no one in the family wanted to look further into it, so we never got a further autopsy. I think his autopsy note said something like a heart attack. He usually texted and called me daily, and saw me weekly. But after not texting me for a few days, I got worried and called the police to do a welfare check. An hour later, they called back with the news. Unfortunately, he's deceased. Those words run through my head now all the time. I had deep regrets when he passed. He was always a hypochondriac and also just came up with excuses and minor problems that only I could be able to fix. I.e., the Netflix was broken. He usually just didn't know how to restart the PS3 when the app crashed. Or my rabbit, who he cared for, was sick. So when he texted me at odd hours, a couple days before I called the police, saying that my rabbit isn't eating, I didn't take him very seriously. I met him for lunch a day before he stopped responding, and he was very shaky and said he wasn't feeling well. But he said that weekly, so I figured I had no reason to worry. It's been the same story for years. I was wrong. Once I got that phone call back saying he was gone, my world stopped. For the past several months, I've been fairly in denial. I went through his belongings after it happened, but my family wasn't interested in helping, and we ultimately ended up hiring a lady to do an estate sale for us. I grabbed what I could think to hold on to and ended up with a lot of stuff in boxes that I hadn't even looked through, at least not too well. This will be relevant later. A few weeks ago, I had a dream. I haven't dreamed of him since he passed. When it first happened, I wished to see him one last time. But as time went on, I began to give up on seeing his ghost or his presence one last time. That idea fully faded away, so I am forever grateful for this experience I was given weeks ago. I dreamed that I was in a house I didn't recognize. It was clearly very old. My dad was born in 1947, if that holds any relevance to this house being so old. I walked up to a kitchen island and sat at the bar stool, which is when I see my dad, easily 20 years younger, walk out of a room opposite from me. A small brown and white dog I had never seen before came out with him. I remember not being able to identify the breed, but the characteristics of the dog burned into my memory. Black nose, fluffy brown with white and blonde patches, and very small. He followed the dog walking towards me. I forget how the conversation started, but I know I began crying rather quickly. He looked so good. He was wearing a long-sleeve blue-patterned dress shirt that he used to wear a long time ago. I cried and he asked me, "What's wrong, kiddo? I'm better now. You don't believe me?" And I responded with, "I do believe you. You look happier and healthier. That's why I'm crying." He told me not to worry. He would be okay and so would I. And then he said goodbye, left the front door, and I woke up sobbing. It was a good bit of closure for me, and I've hung on to it since it happened. I figured my mind was creating that memory for me, to cheer me up and provide me that closure. But 2 days ago, I started sorting through some stuff that's been in boxes for several months, and I came across a folder I don't remember. It was full of old pictures, his old girlfriends in the 60s and 70s, cars and stuff. I didn't remember grabbing it, but it was a nice bit of memories to hold on to. One picture stood out though. It made me genuinely lose my breath and tear up when I saw it. That exact same little dog from that dream, who I'd never seen in my life. A photograph that was decades old. I texted my aunt and she confirmed that it was one of his favorite little dogs, but I forget what she said his or her name was. I didn't even tell her what had happened. I described the dog and she told me how much he loved that dog without skipping a beat. I like to believe it really was my dad in that dream. He had the strength to come back and bring one of his favorite pups along with him, because he was a huge animal lover and I wouldn't expect it any other way. I don't know what I believe happens to us when everything is over, but I believe him when he said that he's okay. I believe that wherever he is, he's happy. I'm forever thankful for that. Case file number 274, written by Aristot N. Blood brothers connected by one mind. My best friend and I have always been connected somehow. If he calls me, or opposite, it's over 90% certain I thought of making a call to him. We grew up together and have been best friends for over 40 years now. Unfortunately, we live far from each other now and we only meet like once a year or so. Anyhow, I recently sent him a snap of a candle light with my coffee and a glass of cognac, saying something like, "This is okay, positive," a phrase that is not that common and I don't think I've used before. As soon as I sent the snap, I noticed I had received a snap from him. As I opened it, it was the exact same snap as I had sent him with the same exact phrase, and it was sent at the exact same time as I sent mine to him. It's like, what the hell? I called him and pointed out the coincidence, and he just said, "That's not weird at all. We're blood brothers with one mind." I'm just wondering if anybody else experienced something like this. Case file number 275, written by OKAD748S Alt, Invisible Homeless Man. Today when I woke up, I went to the store because my mom asked me to get some things for the house. I was walking back home with groceries in hand and I saw this homeless man sitting there and begging. The cashier had given me a few quarters as change for a soda I frankly forgot to get. So I dropped a few quarters in his cup and he says the usual thank you and smiles. As I'm on my way back home, my friend calls to see if I would be down to try this new game he bought from Walmart. I said I would love to, so he came to pick me up. When we were walking to his house, I saw the same homeless man on the curb. So I do a friendly wave and he waves back. My friend asked what I was doing. I told him I was waving to the homeless guy over there. He said, "What homeless guy?" I assumed he was messing with me. So when it was time to go home, we had to walk the same way. This time we were walking on the same curb as a homeless guy. I and my friend are talking about his new Xbox game when he straight up steps on this guy's foot. My friend just stepped on his foot and kept walking like it was nothing. And I said, "Hey, you just stepped on this guy's foot." He gave me a look like I was retarded or something, and we walked home where I'm writing this. This event thoroughly confused me, but there's always the chance that he's just messing with me. Note: the homeless man did react to when my friend stepped on his shoe. He kinda winced in pain, like he would be stepping on a Lego, but kept doing his thing after that. If you're enjoying this video, consider giving it a like. Now on to the next story. Bonus file, written by Gigabyte XXX. A ding. Again and again and again. This is something that I really can't explain at all, and anytime I tried to look up something similar to my experience, I couldn't find anything. I've told a couple of people about my experience, and some have agreed that it might be something paranormal. I should start by saying that I'm 18, female, and that my parents are divorced, and have been divorced since I was 3. I lived in Texas with my mom until I was 8, and I believe it's when I moved back to California, where I was born, that this experience started happening. I'm not sure when exactly it happened. It honestly could have even started when I was living in Texas. But sometimes in the morning, while I and my mom would get ready, I would hear a very distinct ding sound. It sounded a lot like a bell, but always caught my attention too, and always sounded the same. I assume it would come from my mom's room, since she was the only other person in the house with me. I always thought it was a noise from her dresser, because she had glass plates holding her jewelry and perfume, but I'm not sure if I ever saw her at the dresser whenever I would hear the ding sound. I remember asking her one day about the dinging noise and what in her room made it, and she said nothing in her room made that noise. Like I said, it was something so clear and loud to me, and immediately when I heard it, I recognized it. I just brushed it off because it wasn't every day either, and just happened once in the morning. But I really did heavily associate my mom with this bell-like sound. A few years later, my dad and stepmom planned a New Year's trip with their friends to go to Arizona. So basically, they rented a huge house where everyone would stay, and it was mostly for the grown-ups to drink and do whatever, while I and my younger siblings would try to entertain ourselves. I believe I was 14 at this time, but the most important thing to remember is that I'm with my dad and my mom is back in California. My and my siblings shared a room. I and my brother both got single beds in the room, and my sister slept on an air mattress in between us. And the room we were in was connected to the kitchen, and the other rooms were nowhere close to ours. Being a teenager, I was up late on my phone during the night, while my 2 siblings were fast asleep. I believe it was the first night, but I was doing something on my phone, I can't remember what exactly, and I heard the ding come from somewhere in the house. It did sound pretty far in the house, so I thought maybe someone had the same thing as my mom. But it was dead silent in the house, and most likely everyone was asleep. It was a quick ding, and I didn't put any thought to it. The next night was probably the scariest experience I've ever had. It was around 1 or 2 a.m., and I was on my phone, and probably the only one awake at that hour. I was just minding my business when I heard the ding again, coming from somewhere in the house. Of course, I noticed it, but went back to what I was doing. Then I heard it again, and again, and again. The same ding. Sounding the same, and the pause between each ding was the same. I don't remember ever hearing the ding more than once at a time. But the dinging just kept going, and then I realized it was moving. I could hear it coming from somewhere distant in the house and coming closer to where I was. It sounded like it was floating to me, or something was carrying it to me. Now I should say that the door is wide open to the room I was in, and I froze once I realized it was moving. I had never felt so much fear in my life, and when I heard the dinging entering the kitchen, I hid under the covers and tried to pretend I was asleep. It entered the room, and it was super loud at this point. Granted, I was shaking and terrified, but the dinging never moved from the foot of the bed and stayed there for about 2 minutes, just dinging over and over again. I believe it was watching me. Finally, I heard it leave the room and disappeared into the house, and I fell asleep right after. I should also say, I never heard any footsteps or anything other than the dinging. Just the damn dinging over and over again. I told my parents about it in the morning, but they didn't believe me at all. I haven't heard the dinging again ever since that night, and it's a certain ding that I never heard anywhere else, and hopefully won't ever hear again. I have no idea what it could be. The only conclusion I have is maybe it was something that followed me until I was 14. It couldn't have been connected to my mom, since she wasn't even in Arizona at the time. I sometimes regret not looking up from under the covers or even taking a video so I could have audio of this noise. If anyone has any idea what it could be, please let me know. I can't find anything about it, and I've been curious about this for so long. Thank you for reading, and have a good night, or morning, or afternoon, wherever you are. Bonus file, written by Iswebsty. A feeling, an overwhelming weight on the chest. Something is there. My fiance and I bought a house in July and have been settling in. It's an oldish house built in the 60s, across from a church. The church used to own it at one point, but we're not the last owners. Anyway, my paranormal sensors have always been auditory. I have tons of personal paranormal experiences that involved hearing rather than sensing or seeing. And after a few of my scarier encounters, I've kinda learned how to turn it off and on, and I prefer to keep it off. I've been with my fiance for 4 years, and I'm the spooky loving one. He is largely more logical. This matters because I'm about to recount to you his experience, and I want to make it known that I've never heard him say anything like this in our 4 years together. Nothing too weird has happened in the house so far, except the fire alarms keep going off. There are 2 of them, one in the hallway and one in the back room that's my office, and both of them keep randomly going off. We've replaced the battery, and they're not hooked to the electric in any sort of way, and one still went off the other night as we started some intimate acts. Another slightly weird thing, my dog won't go outside. My dog is used to living on a mountain. He was raised being outside on his own a good amount of time, and he loves being outside. Now it's sincerely a struggle to get him to go outside to the yard every single day. Sometimes I have to physically push him to the door and out the door. Once he's out there, he stares back inside at me, and it takes me ignoring him and leaving the kitchen for him to finally go out into the yard. So, 2 nights ago, my fiance is having indigestion and wakes up in the middle of the night. He has to use the bathroom, so he gets up and starts heading through the kitchen towards the hallway. He suddenly stops and gets an overwhelming feeling of, "Don't go down there." And he says it felt like a huge warning and weight on his chest. He said he felt watched as he turned around. He comes back to bed and lays down. Our room is a bonus room, the previous owners made out of the garage. He lays awake for hours staring at the ajar door of our room, still feeling like he's being watched with the heaviest weight on his chest. He says that at some point, that feeling went away like a sudden whoosh. It just happened and he felt immediately lighter and was able to fall back asleep. The next morning, I let the dogs out. They sleep in our spare bedroom halfway down the hall. Our young and dumb dog comes out right away as she always does, but my dog is laying on the bed, trembling all over. I've only ever seen him like that when there's thunder. He does get up after some coaxing and does his usual resistance to going out, and he's still trembling all over. I checked the weather and we've had no storms, and it was dry outside. Last night as we go to lay down, my fiance says he feels that heavy "I'm being watched" feeling again. I don't feel it at all. Any ideas what this could be? I'm a mental health therapist and will keep an eye on my partner. But there's nothing currently to suggest this is a mental health thing for him. He's also not the type to make things up. I certainly believe his experiences. Edit. It's been maybe 10 minutes since I posted this, and our Roomba has now gone off 3 times in the last minute in the living room. Please charge Roomba. We are still both in bed. My fiance is sleeping now, and I'm in tears because what the fuck? All of our animals are still in the rooms. No one has touched the Roomba. Case file number 276, written by Prior Data 8692. Mushroom lawnmowers and dancing. Quite a day. When I started looking for apartments, I was told to find the most eccentric of characters in either a roommate or a landlord. I got the latter. Barry's a bit of an oddball, but I can never figure out his past, especially since his house I rent my garage apartment through is so nice. The options were, he either was always a hippie and he just stumbled on some money in life by chance, or he's one of those new wave faux hippies who were too young when the summer of love happened. One afternoon, coming home from work, I see him in the front yard riding his lawnmower. Looked like he was just getting started, and he tends to stay on that sweet ride until the whole job is finished. I wave at him and go inside. I still hear the mower running. On weekends, I try to convince a friend to let me crash at their place, just so Barry's lawnmower that sounds like 10,000 angry bees doesn't wake me up so early. But this was odd, because I still heard the lawnmower running and changing direction in the front yard. But then old-timey swing music started playing above my apartment in the main house. My landlord loves to dance and practices constantly, even by himself. The dancing could go on for hours. So the landlord was mowing the lawn while dancing upstairs? He never ever had any guests over, so I was perplexed. Then I looked out my window and saw him picking through herbs and gourmet mushrooms he grows in the backyard. It was him because he was wearing the same outfit I just saw. Thinking maybe he just stopped the mower, I realized I can still hear it, and it was now following a pattern of mowing the side of the house and front yard. The music was also still playing, and I heard his distinct rhythmic footsteps echoing under the band instrumentals. When I asked him about it, he had no idea what I was talking about, while also looking unfazed. He responded by telling me he'd be putting new mulch down that Saturday morning after a round of mowing. How was he in so many places and doing so many things at the same time? Case file number 277, written by Shader 0. A combo of milk, orange juice, and teleportation. The other day, I went to the grocery store and got a new jug of orange juice. I already had one at home, but the orange juice in it was almost gone. When I got home, I started unpacking my bags. I opened the fridge to put in the orange juice, and the old orange juice was on the second shelf of the fridge. I put the orange juice on the top shelf, and then I continued to unpack the grocery bags. About 20 to 30 minutes after I was done unpacking, I went to pour myself a glass of orange juice. The newer orange juice had pulp, and the old one didn't. When I opened the fridge, the old orange juice was on the top shelf. I didn't notice that it was the old one at first, so I took it out and poured myself a glass. The jug emptied fairly quickly, so this confused me. I went back into the fridge and looked for the new orange juice that had pulp. It was completely gone, and on the second shelf, instead of orange juice, there was milk. The thing is, I already had a carton of milk, which was on the door shelf. So yes, I got a very large combo glitch. The orange juice disappeared, the other one teleported, and the milk duplicated. This is the first time I've ever had something like this, so it's very strange to me. Case file number 278, written by Forever Adapt, a case of trousers, but one shouldn't exist. Last week, I bought a pair of funky-looking second-hand trousers from a seller on Depop. I've had my eye on them for a long time, as I have a very specific taste for floral trousers with an elasticated waist. So today, a parcel arrived via Herms. Hooray! My trousers had arrived. They were packaged in a purple bag and wrapped in tissue paper. Upon trying them on, I was a tad disappointed because they were a bit big on me, but nothing a little needle and thread couldn't fix. About an hour later, I received a parcel from Royal Mail, so a different courier from the first, in different color bag packaging, pink. The item inside is also wrapped in tissue paper, similarly to the first. I opened it, and it's the exact same pair of trousers. The only difference is that it's a size smaller than the ones that I had originally purchased and arrived earlier in the day. My first instinct was that the seller had two pairs and accidentally sent both out to me. But I've just heard back from them, and they have no idea what has happened either. Does anyone have any rational explanation for this? Because I can't figure out one. Also, important to note, as well as having been sent by different couriers, the mystery one had no return address on it, whereas the one I purchased had one. If anyone knows what happened, please share. Case file number 279, written by FWDE. When a car goes from one model to the next in 5 seconds. So last year, I was working at a customer service role at an insurance company, over the phone work. We got a 20-minute morning break, 30-minute lunch, and a 20-minute afternoon break. During my lunch break one day, I went to sit in my car out in the park and eat my food, to make it easier to have a smoke before going back inside. Plus, then I could listen to music while I eat. Basically, I'm a car enthusiast, and I tend to notice cars and their registration plates in passing. My eyes just sort of automatically go to cars and their plates and take them in by habit. I was walking towards a smoking area and noticed a red Vauxhall Opel Astra 2013 model up ahead, slowly starting to reverse out of a parking space. I go to the smoker's area just behind the wall next to the Astra, which was reversing. I lit up my cigarette and turned around again to face the car, I guess to judge their driving skills, and instead of being a red Astra, it was now a red Audi A1 with the exact same registration plate, backing out of the parking space where the Astra had been not even 5 seconds ago. I watched it drive out of the car park and onto the road in complete shock. I thought about it constantly for the next week, and it started to make me feel sick and question everything in life the more I thought about it. Not really had anything else weird like this happen to me before, and I hope it doesn't, because it really freaked me out. Edit. Extra. Actually, I think it was literally the day after, or a couple days later, not 100% sure, but me and a load of people around me, friends and family, all felt this one particular day felt weird. It was just coming into summer, and the air was really weird, like nothing felt real for the whole day. I messaged a few friends and told them how weird the day feels, and then a few other friends also messaged me saying they feel like today is a really weird day. I think it was around July or August 2020, but I'm just putting that down there to change the air, etc. That happens with a change of season. Never felt that before though. Case notes, file number 279. So I'll just dive in here and say this is probably quantum crossover. It really is the most common glitch outside of losing objects like my tennis balls. You walked from the parking lot just a little bit and the car that you saw morphed. I couldn't say there's any logical explanation to that besides being in a different universe. And then you mentioned that things felt weird after, although it is strange that your friends also felt weird because they wouldn't have crossed over to the same universe you did. If something big happened in the original universe and multiple people died, they don't jump to the same universe altogether. Or do they? Bonus file written by Aragawa. When a witch orders a pizza. So I was making a pizza delivery tonight. I live in a rural town, and the last order of the night was to a house I've never been to before. The address was deep in the woods, about 3 miles from the main road. I'm on a rough dirt path when I see a few guys outside a trailer, so I asked if they were the address I was delivering to. They said, "To hell with that place. It's on the road. Good luck." I should have turned around then and there. I find the trailer at the end of the path. Next to it was an abandoned 2-story concrete building that gave off ill vibes. I knock on the door and wait, looking over my shoulder the whole time. A lady finally answered the door, and she had to be about 120 years old or something. She touched my hand. Hers felt colder than ice, and she said, "Such young skin," in a scratchy old lady voice. At this point, I'm already freaked out. I got back to my car to get the hell out of Dodge, but got my phone to get a picture of the building first. My phone's screen starts flickering rapidly, losing connection to the Bluetooth. My car auto-switched to the radio upon losing connection, and the stations were cycling insanely fast. This was faster than manual or auto possibly could go. During the cycling, I heard the most god-awful growling sound my ears have ever heard. At this point, my hair is on end, my heart is racing, and I'm sweating as if I ran a marathon. I hit 80 miles per hour on dirt back to the main road. What the hell did I just experience? Any ideas? Was it a witch's house, a satanic worshiper? If you have any ideas, I'd like to hear them. Thankfully, I'm home now, because that was the most scared I've ever been. And keep in mind, I've been face to face with a mother bear. Case file number 280, written by Harry Taco 2018. When an instinct is so accurate, it defies logic. I'm a police officer who worked for a small town. For context, I'm also married with one child. One afternoon, I woke up around 4:50 p.m. to get ready for the night shift. As I was getting ready, I had this strange feeling that something wasn't right. It didn't seem to bother me too much, and I assumed that I was just still hazy from waking up. I finished getting ready and went out to my car to leave for work. I got about a mile or two from my house and the strange feeling returned. This time, I had a voice in my head telling me to turn back home and call out. Being that I work for a small agency, I didn't have the luxury of calling out due to us being short-staffed. I continued my way to work, which is about a 15 to 20 minute drive. As I got closer to town, I began having extreme anxiety to the point where my stomach felt like it was in knots. I got to work and met up with my sergeant. I knew that my sergeant was going to leave around 12 a.m. and I would be by myself. I decided to tell him what I was feeling. He shrugged it off and just told me to watch my back. As the night drew on, my anxiety seemed to come and go. It definitely helped talking to my sergeant about it, but as we were in the patrol car talking, I heard a burglary call come in the county for the same road that I live on. Dispatch advised that they were on the phone with a female subject and she was hiding in the bathroom with a gun along with her daughter. I immediately opened the computer and realized it was my address. I frantically called my wife multiple times and I couldn't get in touch with her. I began driving as fast as I could to get home. Thankfully, the deputies got there before I could, and everything seemed to be okay. I eventually got to the house and spoke with my wife about it. She stated that the house alarm went off while she was giving my daughter a bath, but what was strange was that the alarm was for a window break. I honestly didn't even know we had alarms for the windows, and I've never had any alarms for those go off before. It wasn't windy or raining outside either. Part of me wonders if someone may have tried to get in but freaked out when they heard the alarm. Either way, after that occurred, I returned to work and felt much better. Case notes, file number 280. So my gut says here, it's either guardian angel, some entity, maybe an angel, whatever you want to call it, trying to help you, because there was a threat coming and your wife was in danger. You didn't know exactly what it was, but that feeling was there, the knots in your stomach. The other possibility is that, in another universe, this already happened, and you somehow tapped into that knowledge. So not a crossover, but if there's quantum crossover, then that means that our consciousnesses are all connected to each other through the multiverse. So it's not unreasonable to imagine that maybe we can transfer information between them. Maybe these gut instincts we get are at least in part from that information. Case file number 281, written by Zuckanukut, when a makeup palette vanishes right before their eyes. I live with my fiance. In our bedroom, he has his side with his PC set up, while I have my side with my PC and vanity desk. One day I was doing my makeup. I have a white desk that helps show everything on it. My makeup palette is a bright hot pink color about the size of a notebook. I put my makeup palette down to do something else on my face. As soon as I reached back for it, it was gone. Strange, I thought. Maybe it fell or I misplaced it. Checked under and the sides of my desk, nothing. My fiance watched me and talked to me the entire time. And somehow, even he questioned where my palette went. He got me the palette as a gift. I couldn't have misplaced a notebook-sized thing when I literally stayed seated the entire time. I didn't have time to worry about it, so I just carried on with my day. During the day, I found a nice cabinet I wanted to transform into my art supply/makeup vanity. I built that thing and started organizing all my stuff. I just could not for the life of me find my dang palette. I've turned my room upside down and it's still not to be seen or heard from. Recently, we were told to pack up our stuff for fumigation. Somehow, even with me combing through and packing my entire house, it's still not to be seen. I've checked my photos from that day to make sure I wasn't imagining using it. All of my pictures showed that I had a certain palette. Rest in peace to my brand new palette I only got to use once. Bonus file, written by Perpetual Goat Noises, the cold void draining all heat from my body. When I was 7, I'm 22 now, I had some sort of experience. I was sleeping and I remember something jolting me awake from a dead sleep. I looked around to see what woke me up, and there was a man standing in my doorway. He was around 6 feet tall based on the door frame, and had an average to slim build. However, he was made entirely of energy. His figure was made from TV static. I remember being scared and hiding under my blankets, but every time I would look up, he would be closer. This happened several times until I felt him standing at the foot of my bed. Then he touched my foot. I do not have words to tell you how cold that touch was. My foot went numb immediately, as if it felt the actual void was removing the heat from my body. Then he disappeared. Edit. For those saying sleep paralysis, I could move, and I did, during the encounter. I also have no history of sleep paralysis whatsoever. Bonus file, written by Social T100, a shadow figure with incredible abilities. I am a 100% science-based skeptic who experienced something I can't explain at my office in late May of this year. Due to the pandemic, my office building that normally accommodates 1,000 employees has largely been empty save for reduced security teams, maintenance personnel, cleaning staff, and a handful of mission-critical employees, of which I am one. On May 28th at 1:10 p.m., I was sitting at my desk, the lone employee at the far end of one of many large, empty, cubicle city-style suites. Despite the emptiness, the fluorescent lighting and outer wall windows provided a comforting brightness. The creepiness factor is supplied by the multiple of small whiteboards hanging outside cubicle entrances, all marked with the same date, March 16, 2020, the day of evacuation. On this particular day, I was reading emails when I heard very distinct heavy footsteps in an almost jogging gait approaching my cubicle entrance and stopped abruptly. I looked up expecting to see a maintenance person. Instead, there was no one there. The sound I experienced did not match what I was not seeing. I jumped up to catch the person, thinking they turned quickly to exit the suite after not realizing I was sitting there. I looked down the aisle and saw no one, so I walked towards the exit. Suddenly there was noise coming from the print room a few feet ahead of me. It sounded as though someone carrying a heavy box was having trouble lifting it onto the counter and hit the massive network printer and overhead cupboards in their attempt. I approached the doorway to the print room, ready to say hello and offer my assistance. When I got to the doorway with a smile on my face, yay, other people, I very quickly realized the room was empty, and this was a second instance of sound not matching visuals in less than a minute. I was certain at that moment that I needed assistance from security, so I backed away from the printer room entrance and turned to leave. As I approached the cross-section of 2 aisles, I noticed something unusual. There was a post extending from the corner of a cubicle to the ceiling, an approximate height of 10 feet. This would not normally grab my attention, except that there are no posts in that configuration on any corner cubicles in the suite. The unusual post was not solid like the others and seemed to be composed of a density of moving holographic grayscale pixelated matter. I felt a little trepidation, but I also remembered thinking, whatever this is, it's pretending to be a post and was hoping I didn't notice. At that moment, and almost as if it acknowledged it had been discovered, the tall rectangular shape transformed in motion, or morphed, to what I can only describe as the side profile of a tall hooded figure whose frame commenced 6 inches from the ceiling and continued to the floor. Again, moving holographic pixelation of various degrees of grayscale. This included a bent elbow and curvature of the spine similar to humans, except that at approximately thigh level, the pixelation became sparse and much more translucent, to the point that I could see the pattern of the carpet through the lower body. The figure remained in a static position and profile. The pronounced curvature of the cut of the hood at the neck and the extension of it in a perpendicular gravity-defying nature, lack of drape, held my attention. I immediately thought, it's projecting an image of something that would frighten humans. It's trying to look like the Grim Reaper, but they're probably not familiar with gravity, or their jawbone is very box-like. I know, I'm analytical that way. As soon as I processed the thought, the apparition glided forward into complete invisibility. I exited the suite and immediately reported it to security. I have since moved my equipment to a suite where 2 other employees work. There have been no other sightings since, although in recounting my experience, another on-site employee described having a similar sighting in the early days of the pandemic. They saw an extremely tall figure move quickly into invisibility as it came through a wall, crossed the hallway, and glided into the opposite wall. I have googled similar extremely tall hooded figure experiences, and did find some reference to a common theme of this type of apparition, cited in abandoned buildings, usually hospitals and other buildings used in health-related fields. This checks all my boxes. FYI, it's not that I don't get frightened easily, or that I somehow forgot the existence of an emergency exit right across from my cubicle. I just never felt threatened at any point, despite not knowing their capabilities beyond projection of moving images and sound. I definitely remember feeling completely fascinated during the experience. Fascination level 150%, fear level 30%, anxiety level 10%, and now I feel compelled to find out who or what they are, and if that feeling was just me being me, or if it was projected onto me as a defense mechanism, for either party's sake. I will admit that this experience consumed me at first, and I have since grown to roll with it. And yes, I was back at work the next day. I am not at liberty to disclose my location, my employer, and other identifiers. Has anyone encountered something similar? Does this sound like it may be a shapeshifter or something similar to what has been witnessed on Skinwalker Ranch? Bonus file, written by Wyatt Youthman123YT. A shadow figure in his dream, but leaving a red handprint on his stomach. I have told this story to almost all my friends. I'm not making it up. When I was around 4 or 5, I was getting tucked in. There was this closet to my right. It was a sliding closet door and could be opened effortlessly. After my parents went to bed, I closed my eyes and attempted to start drifting. After around 5 minutes, I hear a rattling to my right and I jolt up. Now I believe I was awake, and I would soon be proved wrong. I got up out of my sheets, stood up, went over to my closet, and when I did, the noise stopped. For a second I thought, maybe I should go back to sleep, but I was determined to find out what this noise was in my closet. I never have been the "there's a monster in my closet" type of kid, but after this I sure looked at my closet differently. I slowly began to open the closet door. Halfway through fully opening it, a loud screech screamed back and forth through my left and right ear, alternating quickly. I covered my ears and then the ringing stopped. I looked back up and saw what I can only describe as 2 flickering red eyes floating there, slowly fading in and out of existence. Now I'm pretty fucking thankful I already went to the restroom, because I would have pissed myself right there and then. After a second of sitting there, barely holding back tears thanks to adrenaline, and everything seemed to have stopped, I was shoved to my bed by unknown forces, and it began to wrap the blankets around me so tightly that I couldn't move. The blankets loosened, and I began to throw them off, and when they were off, I had full intent to run to my parents' room. However, after getting the sheets off, I looked at my door and saw a shadow figure standing next to it, glowing red eyes fixated on me. Now being a kid, I screamed. If I couldn't go to my parents, they would come to me. But after I did, the shadow mimicked the scream in its creepy manner, and it slapped me full on my stomach. I woke up with a furious jolt. I thought it was just a nightmare, all in my head. However, I noticed a burning sensation on my stomach and lifted up my shirt to see a bright red hand mark. No doubt it was. I screamed once more, and I heard my parents practically kick the door down and run into my room. They all saw it, the hand mark, and we still talk about it to this day, with no clue about who or what it was. I have slowly pieced more info about my old home's history and deaths together, and I would be happy to share the information, just not now. Thank you for reading. This was painful to type, mentally and physically. Case file number 282, written by Admiral Action 859. It's a birthday, but elevators are included. You know what that means. Glitch time. It was my 18th birthday, and me and about 15 plus friends of mine had all just come back to my apartment building from a birthday dinner they had for me at TGI Fridays. The apartment building I grew up in is a tall building with only 2 elevators and 2 staircases. I lived on the 11th floor. Sometimes, me and my friends or family of my age would race elevators for fun as kids if we happened to have both elevators arrive at our floor at the same time. This was the case that night. Both elevators got to the lobby at the same time, and me and my friends packed into both elevators and hit the door close buttons at the same time. I heard the usual tone of the doors closing on both elevators, and they both closed within a split second of each other. There were only about 7 or 8 of us packed into each elevator, but I was the only one in my elevator that lived in the building and knew the ins and outs of racing elevators for fun. I knew that both elevators were equal in speed and were fairly quick. It took maybe 10 seconds to get from the ground floor to my floor, the 11th floor. There was not a chance in hell that anyone could scale the 11 flights of stairs quicker than that. I also knew that when both elevators were traveling in the same direction, me and my friends would be able to yell at each other through the elevator shaft and talk to each other in transit, as long as the elevators left at the same time and went in the same direction, which they did. Me and my rowdy teenage friends were all laughing and shouting to each other from elevator to elevator, but about halfway up, the other elevator sounded more drowned out, like speaking into a fan, and then we stopped hearing them altogether. The way my old apartment building was designed, the elevators are in the very center of each floor, and each floor is just a long, single rectangular hallway. My apartment was at the far corner of the building, as far as can be away from the staircases and elevators. When my elevator opened with my friends in it, I was ready to make a mad dash towards my apartment door, hopefully just beating out the other elevator door as it should have been opening, with just enough time for me and my friends in my elevator to get a head start and win the race to my apartment. Instead, we all flew out of our elevator to see no one else coming out of the other elevator. We didn't hear it open. We didn't hear several loud teenagers jump out like I had expected. It was as if the other elevator wasn't even used at the same time we used ours, and our friends were nowhere to be found. I knew the timing of these elevators perfectly. I had grown up in this building since I was a toddler, and had taken these ups and downs and raced friends and neighbors with them my whole life. I found it really odd that the elevators didn't open up at the same time. I also thought that maybe the other one just stopped on another floor between the lobby and the 11th floor, which of course was a common thing to have happened, and would have been good news since that would have meant we definitely won the elevator race. My elevator went as fast as it possibly could have gone, going straight from the lobby to the 11th floor. We all made our way down the hallway and into my apartment, and found that my family and neighbors, very sweet of them, had decorated the apartment with pictures of my friends and I, and surprised me with a cake. The strangest part is that this whole surprise ensemble included all of my friends who were in the other elevator that went missing in action. It was winter, and they all already had their jackets off and had thrown them onto my bed in my bedroom, and all looked as if they had already been hanging out inside the apartment for at least a few minutes. It made absolutely no sense. Both elevators left the lobby within the same second, and should have taken the exact same 10 seconds or so to reach my floor, but somehow they had clearly got to my apartment minutes ago. I asked my friends in the other elevator how they got up there so fast, and I just got a confused reaction from everyone, including my friends that were in my elevator too. I was the only one who was left scratching my head as to how everyone inside the other elevator seemed to teleport straight into my apartment somehow. Super freaking weird. I just shrugged off the experience as best as I could at the moment, although it still has me wondering to this day how that happened. I'm a longtime reader of Glitch in the Matrix, and this memory always comes to mind when I start reading the latest posts. Case file number 283, written by Hellon Heels 33. A random storm on a pasture, and nothing makes sense. Fully aware I may sound like a wackadoodle, but we're gonna roll with it. I live on a small farm and have 2 horses and a mini horse. My mini horse is an arse, and occasionally would escape. So a year ago, had put an extra line in the pasture, and that's kept him in, even when the fence isn't turned on. Electric fence. I haven't had an issue since. Cue this morning. I let the dog out and did a horse check. The horses are in the pasture currently, furthest away from the house, and I couldn't see my tiny horse. I ran back inside and grabbed my boots. The grass is tallish, 5 inches maybe, and even when I was almost at the pasture, I couldn't see him. I blinked, and he popped up, seemingly out of nowhere. Weird, but whatever. He could have been sleeping laid out on his side, which he will do in the morning. Walked back to the house and plugged in the electric fence just in case. Took a shower, looked outside, and he's gone again. Now he's on the road. He's never left the immediate property. I scrambled to put my clothes on and go grab him and drag him back in. No idea how he got out, no pulls or breaks in the fence. I knew it might rain today, so I moved some plants. It barely drizzled. About an hour later, winds came up hard all of a sudden. Winds are straight up whipping. Hearing the unmistakable sounds of a tornado, I grab the dog and bolt to the closet. Lasts for maybe 2 minutes. The house is vibrating for the first time ever. So I thought I may just be tired and crazy, but it flipped my 15-foot pool. That pool hasn't moved through hurricanes or tropical storms, but this time it straight up flipped and did a 180 upside down. I have friends who live 1 mile to the east and half a mile to the west. None of them heard or saw a thing, but both report intense storms during the same time. Seems odd that somehow my little few houses would be missed. Just a weird day, and I'm a bit shaken. Case file number 284, written by Nanny Wise. With audio comes control over time. So a few years ago, I was really into these weird internet things called subliminal audios. Basically, these things could supposedly give you anything from a pretty face to telekinesis, and I was really depressed at the time, so I fell really hard for these things. Don't judge me. Anywho, so I was listening to this one that was supposed to give you chronokinesis, which is control over time. At some point during the year, my family was going on a car trip to somewhere in Wyoming, and it began to storm really hard on the way back. There was thunder, lightning, and the rain was hitting the windows super loudly. In addition, my whole family was talking in the car. I remember this part vividly, but for just like 2 seconds, it was like everything stopped. The rain, the thunder, the talking, everything. There was no bridge, no building, no shelter, nothing. It was just like everything stopped. And then, just as suddenly, it all started back up again. This moment was so distinct to me because I had thought this was a subliminal audio I was listening to, giving me control over time. But as the years went by, I realized this moment is a lot harder to explain. Anywho, that's my story. Case file number 285, written by No More Cake for You, a neighborhood frozen in time. Sometimes I'll be in the car or taking a walk when I see people just completely frozen. Nothing else around them freezes, just them. Sometimes they're walking their dogs. Sometimes they water their garden, but they're frozen. It happens maybe twice a month. Like a few weeks ago, I was in the car and I looked over and saw this dude just standing there with his dog. Neither he nor the dog moved. He stood there for a good 30 plus minutes because he was still there when I came back from the fast food run. And a few weeks before that, I saw 4 people having a conversation where they were facing each other and one person's mouth was open like they were speaking, but no sound was coming out and they were all eerily still. Case file number 286, written by OK Thank You, on the fringe of entertainment. A few months ago, I introduced my roommate to the show Fringe. I'd purchased the complete DVD box set several years prior because it's one of my favorite series. We were watching it some way through the first season when the disc tray on the DVD player stopped working, and we ended up just leaving it in. A few weeks ago, I was moving out. As I was going around the house to collect my things, I made a point to pry the tray open to get that disc from the player. When I got it open, it wasn't a Fringe disc at all. It was an SNL Best Of type disc that I have a vague memory of watching with my roommate, but was nearly certain that it wasn't the last disc we played. Regardless, I spot some loose Fringe discs on the display shelf and put them in a box. Now I'm at my new place, unpacking. I have the box set out and I figured I'd put those loose discs back in their place. Only problem is that now I have 2 discs that are of the same season. Season 1, disc 7. Those 2 loose discs are the same. All other discs are accounted for, 5 seasons. I tried to rationalize. I lent out that season to a couple of family members years ago who had never heard of the show, and it'd be very unlikely that they'd have an extra copy of this specific disc, the one I was sure had gotten stuck in the DVD player. I've watched this box set several times over the years, and I've never had an extra disc. I definitely had a what the hell moment, wondering if this is some divine intervention. If this is a sign, which disc do I watch? Case file number 287, written by Show Me Your Kitties, Magic Eyeglass Repair Fairies. Last Monday was my birthday. That's what started this weird and unexplainable event. I didn't really want to do much besides hang out with my boyfriend and chill around the house. My uncle asked me to run errands for him and take some stuff to Goodwill. I was annoyed because it was my birthday, but I agreed to it anyways. A little backstory. I tend to wear funky glasses and take pride in the dorkiest ones I can find. There's a specific pair I wear more often than most, and they're my favorite. They look like they came straight out of your typical 80s school picture, off the face of some nerdy kid. I get tons of compliments on them though. The lenses are a ginormous butterfly-looking lens. I just like that they cover all points of my vision. That's mostly why I wear them all the time. As I was putting my clothes into the trash bags to take to Goodwill, I went to do that typical swing the trash bag over your head and use the force of wind to open it method. As I was coming down with the trash bag, it caught the top of my glasses, causing them to fly off my face and slam face down onto the concrete floor in our garage. I knew before looking at them that they were going to be busted in some type of way, judging by how hard they fell. I just stood there and kind of looked at them for a second, anticipating how bad the damage was going to be. When I picked them up, the left lens had a deep chip gouged out of it. Not just a crack, a chip, maybe a few millimeters in length, completely unmistakable. I ran my fingernail in the chip and was able to feel it perfectly. I was highly annoyed at this point, mostly with myself for agreeing to run errands on my birthday, but also because I did one of my typical clumsy klutz moves to break my glasses. I looked at my boyfriend and was like, fuck, my favorite glasses just broke, and handed them over for him to look at. He confirmed there was a chip in them too. I basically just said, whatever, and continued stuffing clothes into trash bags, trying not to be upset. I put them back on my face before hopping into the driver's seat. As we were on our way to Goodwill, I got annoyed again because I noticed the chip was placed perfectly enough to where it wasn't necessarily obstructing my view, but it was in my view enough that I could see it and it was bugging me. I also couldn't stop touching it. I took them off and handed them to my boyfriend. He examined the chip again for a second time and said, I don't know, maybe they're repairable. Maybe you could order another pair. I sighed and told him it really wasn't a big deal. I decided I wasn't going to worry about going through a repair. I had more glasses at home to get me by, and had an eye appointment coming up in a month or so anyways, and agreed that I just order the same pair again. He also agreed that was the best move, as the cost of a repair just didn't make the most sense. The whole time we were running errands and going to my birthday dinner, I continued to touch the chip. I don't really know why other than it was bugging me all night. When we got home, I put them on my nightstand next to my bed and just left them there, not really sure what to do with them yet. My boyfriend works overnight in a hospital and usually sleeps at my place when he gets off his shift. This tidbit is a little important. When I was getting ready for work a couple of mornings later, he was getting off his shift. We were making small talk and I was just like, man, I wish my favorite glasses weren't broken. I don't want to wear my other pairs today, so I guess I'll just wear my contacts. I went and picked up the glasses to just confirm to myself that they were still broken, I guess. The chip in the glasses was still definitely there. I again was able to run my fingers across the chip and was able to feel it. I put them back down on my nightstand, and that's where they've been for the last week, until today. I got home from work earlier and decided I wanted to clean my bedroom. My boyfriend has been working, so there's been no one here but me. I noticed my glasses sitting where I had last left them on my nightstand, and was debating with myself on whether or not I wanted to throw them away. I obviously wasn't going to wear them again because of the chip, but also they were my favorite glasses and I didn't want to part with them just yet for some reason. This is where the crazy part happens. I go to pick up my glasses and put them on to wear one last time, but for some reason, I'm not seeing the chip in my line of sight like I was before. I didn't think too much of it until I took them back off and looked at the lens. My jaw drops. The chip is gone. The gigantic, fucking noticeable and very obvious chip that I felt so many times is just gone. I run my finger across both lenses because maybe, just maybe, I was mistaken and it was actually the right lens instead of the left. Am I crazy? I clean them hoping to find something. Nope. Literally nothing. Absolutely nothing. I put them back on my face, take them off, feel for chips, put them back on over and over, not even a scratch anywhere. Cold chills creep up my spine and my body is covered in goosebumps. I immediately feel like I'm dreaming and this moment isn't real, or that when I slam them on the floor, that didn't even happen and that my mind is somehow playing a trick. I get up and walk around my house to see if anything else is out of the ordinary. I even look at the glasses again just to make sure it's the same pair, but I know they are because it's my favorite pair. The thought even crossed my mind that maybe my boyfriend wanted to surprise me and get them fixed. But there's no way. He's been working 12-hour overnight shifts and sleeping, so there couldn't have been any time for that in his schedule. I texted my boyfriend what happened and sent him a picture of the glasses. I still feel like I'm crazy at this point and wanted confirmation that I'm not because nothing like this has ever happened to me. I've heard of unexplainable stories like this that have happened to other people, but not any that have happened to me. He's just as shocked as I am when we have no clue how they're suddenly just fine. He joked that all of the oil from my fingers filled the chip because I wouldn't stop touching it. My theory is that a magic eyeglass repair fairy knew that I was sad about my broken glasses, so they appeared in my room and fixed them while I was asleep. Thanks, fairy. I am still blown away, but I'm wearing them on my face as I type this now. Case notes. So I just want to say that I confirm your theory. This was definitely magic eyeglass repair fairies. I mean, we have tooth fairies, right? We have Santa Claus. So why not something for eyeglasses? Come on, people. It just makes sense. Case file number 288. Written by Pryan Shu 0. Afternoon tea with a disappearing biscuit on the side. Usual morning. I had a nice stretch and sat down for my tea to enjoy the warm, sweet delight with a plate of biscuits to dip in. On unfortunate times, the biscuit breaks and you send another biscuit for the rescue. Foreshadowing. I picked up a biscuit, didn't quite dip it yet, and accidentally I dropped it in. From my experience, running to get a spoon is more suitable than using another biscuit to lift the drowned biscuit out. The latter leaves a mess of biscuit residue at the bottom. Anyways, I ran to the kitchen, picked up a spoon, and ran back to save my biscuit. It hardly took me 5 seconds. While I'm exploring the tea with the spoon to lift the fallen biscuit from its demise, I feel nothing. Strange. Now I'm curious. I had a plate right next to me on which I had more biscuits. I emptied the plate, poured my tea into it, and again I saw nothing. No traces of biscuit at all. What shocked me the most was the non-existence of any residue at the bottom of the teacup. I took a sip only to find no taste of the biscuit. My mom was right beside me on the couch. She freaked out too. Some might argue that it somehow got dissolved in it, but trust me, I've had that biscuit drop in my tea before. Today's experience was different. It takes a lot of time for it to dissolve, and still then it leaves some residue at the bottom. This just disappeared in a matter of seconds. Written by Anonymous, a cool draft from the Afterlife. I have never believed in the paranormal, and even to this day, I'm not sure if I believe in the events of this story. It has been stuck in the back of my mind for years, and I thought I would share it with you guys. A bit of backstory. My father served in the Royal Military Police and left the army 4 years ago after 30 years of service. We are from the UK. My father has always been a very serious man, worked very hard, and the little humor he has is very dry. He has traveled the world with his work and experienced all manner of life. He is the last person to believe in the paranormal. So just over 10 years ago, he was on a posting in Germany, the last of the British troops before all the bases were closed. He had moved into a big old house. This house was where Hermann Göring, head of the German Luftwaffe, lived. My father lived there with 3 other high-ranking officers from different regiments, all of which mostly kept to themselves. After 4 months, he happened to have a weekend alone in the house. In the evening, he was sitting downstairs watching TV, when he heard footsteps coming down the stairs and into the hallway. He thought nothing of it until the 4th time he had heard someone come down the stairs. He assumed one of his housemates had returned from leave early. He had gone to look, but there was nothing there, and after checking the rest of the house, he went to bed. The following 2 nights, the same thing happened, but my father put the noise down to it being an old house with creaky floors. Monday morning, he reported the noise, along with a draft in the bathroom and a leaky tap, to the site maintenance office. His housemates had returned, and he had forgotten all about it. A couple of weeks later, he happened to mention the noises he heard to the old German cleaner. She said, in the most matter-of-fact way, that was Cedric. It turns out that Cedric was a Polish prisoner of war who used to work in the house. Cedric was sadly beaten to death in the house, and it is believed his spirit has remained in the house ever since. The cleaner told my father that Cedric walks the stairs every night and makes occasional noises or gusts of wind during the day. My father told us occasionally about the noises, etc. That could have been Cedric, but none of us believed him. He learnt the ways of Cedric, but there was never any flair or imagination to his stories. Just simply, there is a ghost that wanders around my house. 6 months later, I went to Germany for a work experience placement near where my father was based. He picked me up from the airport and took me to the house where he lived. I stayed the night there, and there was no sign or mention of this so-called Cedric. In the morning, I was going for a shower when my father said, "Don't worry about the wind. It's just Cedric, but he means no harm." I thought he was winding me up, but I still put a towel under the door to avoid any drafts. I had just about finished my shower, about to tell my father his made-up ghost doesn't exist, when this breeze/gust of wind/whatever it was blew right through me. It was like nothing I had experienced or known since then. It left me cold for the rest of the day. I grabbed my towel and raced out into the bedroom. I got changed, packed my bags, and walked out of that house. I believe it to be the only paranormal thing I have ever experienced. Thinking back, I cannot see how that could have been a draft or my father winding me up. I don't know what it was, but I do know there was definitely a presence in that house. Case file number 289, written by Yay Me I'm a She. Their daughter presents a ring that was lost. It's been 10 plus years, and we still haven't figured this one out. We do tell this story constantly, and no one has ever come up with a plausible solution. Right after we got married in June 2010, my husband wore his wedding ring to work. At the time, he was working in a big box store's distribution center about 35 miles from our home, working the night shift. He's had a week to get used to wearing it, and he didn't have any issues at work that day with the ring getting in the way. We worried about that. I was afraid he'd lose or break it. At the end of the shift, he went to the bathroom to wash all the black off his hands. He took the ring off, scrubbed it, set it on the right side of the sink, and washed his hands. While doing so, a friend came in and washed his hands on the left side and congratulated him on his wedding, etc., and they walked out together, leaving the ring on the edge of the sink. On the way home, he had his hand out the window, tapping his hand on the side of the car to the music when he realized there was no clinking. He pulled over and checked his key clip, his pockets, socks, and shoes. At the time, he basically wore t-shirts and gym shorts to work every day, so there was a little chance he could miss it anywhere. He called back to work and they checked the restroom to no avail. It was gone. When he got home that night, we checked everything again. He said he remembered setting it down, but knew he hadn't picked it up. We made flyers and word was spread throughout the warehouse, but there was nothing about the ring. It never turned up. We checked the pawn shops around town. Nothing. It's simply gone. A year and a half later, our 3-year-old daughter was playing in a spare bedroom, and she came out chatting away and waving her finger at us. Around her finger was my husband's wedding ring. We have no idea how it got home. When she showed us where she found the ring, it was on the floor in the back of the closet, under the boxes. This was a winter coats closet too, nothing that would have had any interaction with him or the ring. It was June when he lost it, so he wasn't wearing a jacket. He worked in a t-shirt and gym shorts with socks and sneakers. He thought perhaps I had another one made and was trying to be slick, but then he noticed there was a gash in the Celtic knot pattern that he hadn't told me about, so it had to be the real thing. Case notes, file number 289. So now we're back in my wheelhouse. Disappearing items reappearing. But this one is special because it moved distance. I found that whenever objects disappear, even people, they're still bound by the gravity of the planet. Otherwise they would re-emerge in nothingness. Or maybe actually, sometimes they're not bound. That's why some objects come back and others don't. Maybe they do physically reappear in the universe, but they weren't bound by the planet's gravity during that time that they were out of phase, and then they just reappear in nothingness, where the planet was. But why are some bound by gravity? And in this case, how would it move such a great distance from work to home, which I'm assuming is like 10 miles or more? That's quite the commute for a ring. Case file number 290, written by Comic Book Guy, 87. From Red to Blue, a charging mystery. My phone charger died Saturday evening, so I went to the gas station and bought a cheap red cable charger. Red is my favorite color. I got back home and plugged it in the kitchen to charge my phone. While it was charging, I took a shower, then passed out on my couch watching Tombstone. I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the restroom before going back to bed. After using the restroom, I went to grab my phone to see if it got any texts after using the restroom, and as I was checking my phone, I noticed that the cord on my charger was blue. I turned on the kitchen lights to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me, because it was dark in my apartment, but it was actually blue. I know for a fact when I bought it that it was red, because I remember thinking, oh cool, they have a red charger, and grabbing it. I spent all day today thinking about it in the back of my head, but I can't think of anything else. If you're wondering what the old charger color is, the one that died, it was a plain white one. Case file number 291, written by Eastern Cellist 166, a hidden fort that couldn't exist. I live in a town with several 19th century era buildings, including a few Napoleonic forts, 4 known ones. They are well known to urban explorers and have thoroughly been explored and mapped, including one with several tunnels. When I was 16, me and my friends decided it would be a fun day out to go there. We had done this many times and knew the fort by heart, including all exits and entry points that had not been closed up by the council yet. We went in as usual, and all seemed to be normal. We climbed around and had some fun before moving on to the tunnels. We decided to go through the most popular tunnel there, as it was easiest to navigate, and one of my friends was a bit claustrophobic. We had gone through this tunnel several times before, and so did many others, so it is very well mapped and usually opens up to just a big empty room with windows looking into the center of the fort. This tunnel does fork off in 2 directions, but both lead to similar rooms. However, this time, for some reason, after taking a left at the fork like we usually did, as the room on that side was in a less decayed state, the tunnel opened up to something that to this day, me and my friends cannot explain nor replicate. We entered what at first seemed to be the usual room, but we quickly noticed that it was in a near perfect state. No graffiti, no vandalism, no empty beer cans, or a charred floor from a campfire. There was nothing unusual. It was like the place hadn't been touched since it was converted into a hospital in World War II. We were very confused, but decided to look around. We quickly noticed that it was a completely different fort. We all thought that we had stumbled our way in and that it had somehow gone unnoticed by urban explorers that were in the area before, and we had found it by pure accident. With little hope, I tried looking up the coordinates, but unfortunately, as was often the case in these areas, due to these forts essentially being buried, I couldn't get any GPS signal, which did not surprise me. We explored and speculated on the position of the untouched fort for the rest of the day, thinking we had scored gold, having found yourself the dream hideout or hangout area. The tunnel was roughly 1 kilometer long, so we knew it couldn't be too far from the known location. After a great day of exploring this urban explorer's wet dream, we packed up and left without any problems. We went back through the tunnel and popped out on the other end in the expected place. This is where it struck us. We took great care in noting our way back through the tunnel in order to find the fort again on our next visit. The route we took was the same as we always did. We had not accidentally deviated or anything. This was the exact same route we usually took. Me and a mate decided to quickly run back to it just to make sure. We arrived at the opening and, as usual, the tunnel opened up to the room we had earlier expected. Since then, my friends have tried numerous times to find the fort again. Unfortunately, I cannot take part in the search, at the moment at least, for personal reasons. I have, however, tried to find signs of it on Google Earth, but unlike its supposed neighboring fort, it does not appear there at all. All research I have done related to this does not seem to indicate the existence of this 5th fort that we saw. To this day, that fort remains some sort of glitch in the Matrix. I'm not posting this here for it to be solved, but I just think it's an interesting and mysterious event. Case file number 292, written by Ginny McJuicy. Friend who died was reanimated. I was pretty close friends with this boy in middle and high school, and we lost touch after graduation. He joined the military. In my early 20s, I called his home phone number at his parents' house, just on a whim, and spoke with his brother, who told me that his friend had a brain tumor and was honorably discharged, and then sadly died. For my 20-year high school reunion a few years back, someone set up a Facebook page for the event and included a bunch of old photos. One of them had a shot of my friend and I commented on how sad it was that he died so young. Another classmate commented that he was alive and well and linked his Facebook page. I clearly remembered the conversation with his brother and frequently over the years had moments of sadness over his passing. I sent a friend request that he didn't accept, and we have yet to speak. While it might be easy to assume that this guy just hates me, that's really unlikely. We never had any sort of drama or anything, and I spoke with his brother on the fly, as this was well before social media. Unless his brother had some standing order like, if this girl I was friends with in high school randomly calls the house for no reason, tell her I died. It's just weird as hell. Case notes. So my thought on this is there's a few possibilities. Of the more mundane is, as you say, he just decided he didn't really want to talk to you anymore and thus faked his death in a sense. It's not entirely likely, but it's not impossible either. The other option is maybe in the military or after he was discharged, he saw some sort of crime and now he's in WITSEC. And then in the realm of the unusual, maybe it's a doppelganger just posing as him. Case file number 293, written by Blood Lictor. The only good thing about a mystery wolf spider is when it vanishes. So I just finished doing all my dishes. A full sink's worth and a decent amount on the counter besides it, to give an idea for context. Just after I'd finished everything in the sink and was getting ready to move everything on the counter into the sink, I noticed unusual movement in the now empty sink. I turned to look and there it was, this massive wolf spider sitting over the sink. It was longer from tip to tip than my middle finger, so over 3 centimeters long. Unusually large for where I live and where it was found. It was just sitting there, over the sink, on a decent-sized web, neither of which was there a few moments before. I just stood there, staring at it in disbelief, trying to understand what was happening. 1 minute I was doing dishes in this very sink, and now there's a huge spider with a web covering it. After a few moments of this, I decided to try and take a picture of it, so I turned to grab my phone off the counter. When I turned back, the spider and web were gone, leaving me just as bewildered as before, and now disappointed. I decided to just finish the dishes as if nothing had happened and post this story after. I tried to rationalize the situation in a few different ways, but none of them make sense. The web was too complex to have been made in such a little time. The web couldn't have been there earlier, otherwise it would have been destroyed when I started doing the dishes. I didn't see the spider anywhere earlier, and I would have easily given its size and lack of hiding places near my sink, even with the dishes. There also wasn't any webbing left when it disappeared, so it wasn't destroyed somehow. It just appeared, then disappeared. Not the weirdest glitch I've experienced, but definitely a notable one for me. Case notes. Okay, so let's be honest here. This is the only positive, appearing and disappearing object phenomena glitch that I can recount. I am very happy for you that while the spider did appear, it also vanished a few moments later. Let's just hope it never comes back, especially on your bed. Case file number 294, written by Mao, a voice with no source. This literally just happened to me and my mom, and we are still shaken up and thoroughly freaked out. It's about 7 a.m. here. I woke up to use the bathroom and was gonna browse Reddit in bed before going back to sleep. My mom started to shower and get her makeup done before work, when literally out of nowhere, I heard a huge, echoing beep, like the dial tone when you're calling someone before they pick up. It sounded like it was coming from outside, and it was so loud I got scared it was a tornado or flood warning from outside, and went to check my mom's phone for any warning because mine wasn't doing anything. When I got up though, someone answered on the other end, and it was my dad. He said, "Hello, baby." It was 100% his voice. It had the same cadence and tone as his, and he sounded excited to hear from me. For reference, my parents are separated, and my dad now lives an hour and a half away. I don't get to see him a lot, especially with my chronic health problems, and so it sounded exactly like a phone call I would make to him to catch up. But it was coming from outside, not inside the house, and loud enough so it was like someone was playing the call over a microphone. Then it just stopped, cut short all of a sudden, like someone's hung up on the call. I was thoroughly startled and went to ask my mom if she'd heard it too, and she had. She was in the bathroom getting ready, just down the hall from my room, so she thought that I had just been calling him for some reason, but was wondering why it was so loud. I checked mine and her phone calls history just to make sure, but neither of us called him. I called him just now to ask if he had somehow called one of us, but he had been asleep and I had woken him up. This is the weirdest, most glitchy thing I've ever experienced. I would assume it was straight up hallucination if my mom had not heard it too. Heard him say, "Hello, baby," and recognized his voice. The weirdest thing for me is that this was just it. It abruptly stopped and then nothing else. At least I'm lucky I didn't hear my voice. I'm going to try to go back to sleep. I honestly don't think I could mentally handle that weirdness if I heard myself talking to him. Case file number 295, written by OK Penalty 3654. A big something on his bed, but nothing was there. One day I was playing Warzone, 6 months ago. I was on a losing streak, so I decided to stop playing and go to sleep, since it was already pretty late. Before I continue the story, I would like to mention that my room was clean and my bed was made. I crawled under my sheets, laying on my stomach, and began to stretch my legs out towards the edge of my bed. However, something big and heavy prevented my feet from stretching out fully. It was probably beach ball sized and incredibly heavy. This was judging by the way it felt against my feet. When I realized that there should be nothing at the foot of my bed, I heard a loud thud that shook the apartment and rattled the glass window next to me. The thud was the equivalent to a huge TV or piano being dropped. I immediately got up and looked around to see if something fell. There was literally nothing there. I looked around for 10 to 15 minutes, then went to sleep. I also checked in the morning and there was also nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. I literally have no idea what it could have been. I was not asleep or dreaming, by the way, because I was in the process of getting in bed. Bonus file, written by Daldems. Spirits pranking, or do they just want conversation? Hi guys, I thought it was time to share my story. I would love any thoughts on what it could be. It all began when I was about 7 years old. When I was a young girl, I was playing with my friend in my house one afternoon. We were downstairs when I heard my sister calling my name from the upstairs bathroom. This struck me as strange as I didn't think she was home. My friend also heard it, so we made our way upstairs. The voice continued to call us until we were at the top of the stairs, which is when I realized the bathroom light was off and there was clearly no one in there. We were confused and looked around, convinced she was hiding. My sister came home hours later as she had been out with her friend that day. I couldn't understand what had happened, and neither could my friend. We still talk about it to this day. Nearly 20 years later, with nothing happening until 2015. In 2015, my partner and I moved into a new house to rent. It was an older house, but was decently priced and had great potential. As we couldn't afford the rent on our own, we had to advertise for a few flatmates, and before we knew it, we had filled the house with a decent group of people. My partner and I shared the ensuite bedroom, which was located on the top floor of the house. One day, I was in the bathroom doing my makeup. I had left the bathroom door ajar, which led into our room, but I had our bedroom door shut as I enjoyed the quiet. Suddenly, I heard our closet door in the bedroom open and a few loud footsteps against the carpet behind the open door. I figured this was my partner, who must have snuck into our room without me hearing the bedroom door open. "Hi," I called out, still focusing on myself in the mirror. His voice immediately replied, "Hi." I remember smiling and asking, "What are you doing?" To which he replied, "Nothing." For some reason, the way he said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I can still hear the exact tone in my head. The only way I can describe it is he was being playful or mischievous, as if he was hiding something, perhaps the way a child would answer if they were up to no good. I called back out, "No, seriously, what are you doing?" And to that, the responses stopped. My question was met with silence. When I turned around and opened the bathroom door, I realized no one had been in the room. The bedroom door was still closed, but the most peculiar perhaps is that the closet door was wide open, something I didn't do, and I know it was closed before I went into the bathroom. This startled me to my core, and I remember feeling almost sick as I spook easily. I rushed downstairs and found my partner outside, on the front lawn with our flatmate. I asked him if he was just upstairs, but they both told me they had been sitting there the whole time, and were genuinely confused at my panic. My partner doesn't believe in ghosts and instantly brushed aside my story and tried to calm me down. A couple of months later, our other flatmate Matt, was home alone one day, making himself a cup of tea in the kitchen. He had the tea in one hand and his cell phone in the other, and was walking to the lounge when he said he heard my voice. I'm Canadian and have a distinct accent in our house, whispering, "Hi, Matt," right behind him. He was so startled he dropped his tea and his phone onto the ground and turned around to find no one. He swore that it was my exact voice and even said he spent a good 20 minutes trying to find me in the house after thinking it must be a prank. It was enough to scare him out of the house for the rest of the day, and when he spoke about our similar experiences, we knew there must be something more to it. Other than this, we had other weird encounters like our doors locking us out of the house, TV turning on with full volume in the middle of the night, items going missing and reappearing and then repeating. The usual ghost things. I no longer live in that house, but I think about that encounter sometimes and it still scares me. To this day, I wonder if these occurrences are connected or just a coincidence. I find it interesting why a spirit would mimic people. I've heard speaking to spirits gives them energy, and I wonder if this is a method as they think you're more likely to reply, if it's someone you know. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this. Case file number 296, written by Kill You a Zodiac, a tiny thing with a lot of force. I was going to school at 5 a.m. as usual, but when I reached the last step in my house there, I saw something dark hitting my shoulder with a lot of force, but I couldn't see well because the lights were off. I saw this thing going to the door and sneaking through the tiny gap in the door. Probably not even a cockroach would pass through it. What bothers me the most is that while it was trying to get out, it seemed to be pulled by something. It didn't feel like it was moving normally. The strangest part of it all was that this thing hit me really hard, so it shouldn't be small, but it ran away through a tiny hole. After that, I opened the door and turned on my cell phone flashlight with 2 quick presses of the power button, but there was nothing in the garage. My father was right behind me. He confirmed he heard a loud noise, but he saw nothing. Written by Lord Cheesecake 08. Behind this tree is a portal to the unknown. Last night, me and my dad were out on our porch, and I was going out every once in a while to ride my skateboard around, whenever I wanted to. I ended up going back up to my porch to sit down and chat with my dad. We didn't talk about anything important, but not long after, we heard a group of kids walking around. About 30 seconds later, they emerged from behind our neighbor's house. They were still on the sidewalk though. They walked on the sidewalk, then turned and went onto the sidewalk my house was on. They asked us if we had seen a pit bull, but we hadn't seen the dog at all, so we just simply said no. They continued down the sidewalk and ended up getting close to the corner of the sidewalk. The corner of the sidewalk was blocked by a tree. I watched as the group had all been covered by the tree. I waited about 10 seconds later, and they had not left the corner. My attention to the tree was cut short as I had heard the footsteps of 2 boys walking. They seemed to be following the trail of the other group. They got to the end of the sidewalk and walked behind the same tree. Sure enough, they hadn't come out from behind the tree either. I grabbed my skateboard and rode to the other end of the road to get a look at the corner of the road. I quickly went back up to my porch and asked my dad if he had seen the same thing too. He quickly said yes, mid-conversation. I ran back down and followed the sidewalk on the other side of the road to see if they were still there, but they were gone. They took steps behind a tree and just vanished. Case file number 298, written by Please Help Mel. A proper Spanish glitch. So I've had my fair share of weird stuff follow me around. What I'm going to describe might be related. It might not. I'm not sure. Can anyone shed any light? So we all know that scam calls are pretty frequent, but recently I got a call that kind of pricked my ears and it's been festering in my brain ever since. Normally, I never answer a call if I don't know the number. If it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. But I don't know what happened. I guess I was bored that day. I answered the phone from this private number, and all I heard was a woman, maybe aged 40 to 50, speaking Spanish very quickly and quietly. Not quite a whisper, but I'd say public library volume. Well, I live in the state of Texas, so I know rudimentary Spanish, but not enough to hold a conversation. Well, I asked her a few times, "I'm sorry, what are you saying?" And she would pause for me to finish my question and then answer in Spanish. "Do you speak English?" And she would answer in Spanish again very quickly. In the end, I finally said, "En English, por favor." She went silent for a few beats and then whispered to the point that I could barely hear her. She almost pleaded, "Be careful out there, mijo." Then the line went dead. Has anyone ever heard of something like this happening? It's been bugging me forever. I just want to know. Case notes, file number 298. So my first thought is, were you able to trace the number? I know it said it was private, and the fact that they didn't hang up means that they did want to talk to you, or talk to anyone. Be careful out there, mijo. So she did understand English. I wonder if this was just some entity, maybe a ghost. We know they can communicate through phones. I wonder what their intent or goal was. Maybe just to warn you of something. I'll reiterate the advice this entity, or maybe person, gave you. Be careful out there, mijo. Bonus file. Written by Dot Matrix Graphics. A subtle repair job from his beloved father. Hello everyone. So, I lost my dad in May this year, and as you can imagine, it's been a tough one. Tough for everyone in one way or another with what's going on in the world. My mom always asked my dad to come back and let us know he's okay over the years, and he promised he would. But sadly, not as we thought he would. Hopefully there'll be a time yet. His death came very unexpected, to be honest. From being ignored by the doctors to the point of needing an ambulance because he got so bad from a year until the last week he was here. We called him an ambulance because he was not good at all, and within 13 days in a hospital, he passed away from a brain tumor. My mom spent his last 32 hours by his side until the time came. A priest came into the room and asked my mom if he could bless my dad. My mom responded that she had fallen out with God right now because he didn't listen to her prayers. The priest said he can understand that, but said he can say a prayer for him. At this point, my dad's breathing was very erratic and he was struggling. So my dad's sister arrived and witnessed this standing outside from the door. This was one of his many brothers and sisters that were all there now. The priest said a prayer while holding a cross on his forehead, and within seconds, my dad's breathing changed dramatically and he opened his eyes and took his last breath while looking at my mom. I mention this because it seemed very spiritual, like everything at that right time, and the prayer helped him in some way. I don't know really, but it was very strong. The paranormal part. About 17 years ago, my parents were watching this antique show and this woman took this antique singing bird in a cage. They're housed in brass cages with fine detailing inside, along with a clockwork singing bird decorated with feathers. They're very complicated pieces of history and date back to the early 1900s, I believe. My mom saw it and was like, "Oh my god, I want one. That's so beautiful." And my dad was like, "Yeah, that's so unique." Later in the week, my dad was whispering to me to try and find one as a gift, so I looked around in all the usual places. Sadly, the rebuilt ones that fully functioned were very expensive, and I came across one that needed some work, and since they're like an old watch inside, I told my dad to go for this one, and we'll repair it, since it was in good shape. So he did. We never got around to repairing it. When you twisted the wonder, the bird just tried to move and never made any song, until something told my mom a couple months ago to just try it. And lo and behold, it not only decided to work, it was flapping its wings and twisting its head and fully singing a song like it had been repaired properly. So all this time, my dad was promising to get this fixed. Did he finally keep his promise and send a message for my mom to go and try it? There's been other things too, like my mom saying her hair was being played with while trying to sleep, and the feeling that someone is behind her. But the freakiest thing over the past couple years is when my dad's symptoms started. He bent down one day to light the fire, and he went really bad. Said he couldn't see and had all these flashing lights. Later in the year, about 2 months, he was getting worse, so he had to call an ambulance. 2 years ago, they did an MRI scan and said he was just having a middle brain balance issue. Roll on the virus lockdown, the first one. I noticed he wasn't sleeping anymore. He would act strange at times, and I just thought he was tired. But then his balance started to go, and he'd get migraines every day. Now, this kinda ties in with the events in the house, because when this all started 2 years ago, he said he was sleeping well, etc., But this one night, he felt a full-on hand on his head, just above the forehead. He woke and said, "What's the matter, Teresa?" to my mom, and after he opened his eyes, there was nobody there, and it was only 4 a.m. Now left with the loss of my dad, it's got us believing either something was telling my dad something wasn't right, or they knew he was in pain and it was telling him. 4 weeks before he was admitted to the hospital, the fire alarm just randomly went off too, for no reason. It just fired off for about 20 seconds, and it just seemed so strange. Now we think it was a final warning of maybe the last time he could get help. Bonus file, written by Manabez, a presence in the closet that only her son can see. Hey everyone, I debated posting here, but it's worth a shot. My son is 10 months old and still sleeps in my room, but I have his clothes hanging up in a small closet in the bedroom, meant to be his. We bought this townhome back in summer, and I'll bring him to the closet with me in his bedroom to look for pajamas or an outfit for daycare. Every single time I bring him there, he looks into the darker part of the closet. We have sliding doors for this closet, and he smiles and laughs right away. His eyes literally followed something back and forth, just locked onto it. He doesn't do this in any other part of the house. At first I thought it could be one of the cubbies I have with a picture of a cartoon bear, but I realized he doesn't even look at that. Today, I tested it out again, and of course he smiled and giggled right away. He even put his head onto my chest like he was shy, and he only does that when one of my friends comes over or with someone he doesn't know too well. It honestly freaked me out. The other day, I showered in the bathroom that connects to my bedroom, which he sleeps in. I was getting ready after the shower, and I swear I heard something whisper my son's name. I went to check and saw nothing. My son was still asleep. What do you guys think? Is it a good spirit? Bad? Should I be worried? I'm pregnant with number 2 and wanted to move him to his own bedroom soon, but this is making me want to keep him with me. Case file number 299, written by Batman v Superman 3. When you look and look and look and look and look everywhere for something you lost, and then it turns up in the most obvious spot possible, somewhere you couldn't possibly have missed. This happened earlier this year, I believe around March 2021, and it was witnessed by me and in a way, my wife as well. I told my friend about it right when it happened. It is probably the one thing that convinced me beyond any doubt something is peculiar about this world. So one day, I got home and couldn't find my wallet. I think it's no big deal. It's in my car like the other 99.999% of the time, when I can't find it. I usually leave my wallet in the car sometimes. I check my house just to be sure. Nope, not here. Oh well, it's in the car then. So a couple hours pass and I'm like, man, I need my wallet. So I walk downstairs to the car and search the passenger seat of my 4-door sedan, because usually that's where I leave it. I check and I can't find it. I look in my work laptop bag and I look around the passenger seat and even the driver's seat and I can't find it. I think that's weird. So I retrace the events of that day and remember having it up to a certain point at 100% probability, let's say at 2 p.m. The only places I had gone after that point was a friend's house for an hour and then straight home. I text a friend, thinking I left it there. They say no. I go back downstairs and expand my search, looking underneath the seats, opening my laptop bag and checking again. Going into my trunk, checking the back seats of the car, underneath them. There's nothing, nada. So at this point, I text a friend again and say check underneath the table or something, in case it fell out of my pocket and rolled underneath the furniture. Again, they reply they checked, and there was nothing. I'm like, are you sure? They were positive. Now my wife comes home and I tell her I think I lost my wallet. She says, I'll go check for you. She searches a car and comes back and says she couldn't find it. At this point, I'm just not happy, since it was an expensive wallet, over $200, and was a Christmas gift from her several years ago. I'm thinking I'm a klutz somehow. Normally I rarely lose something, let alone something so valuable and used so frequently. Nonetheless, I have this unsettling feeling that I couldn't have lost it. I knew I had it before my friend's house and realized I didn't have it on me when I got undressed when I got home. So there was a very short period I lost it. I started thinking it's not possible. No way that I lost it during this time. Again, I go down to the car, with my wife accompanying me, and we just basically do a cavity search of the car and search everywhere and start cleaning it up of even the smallest piece of trash, just in case it was hiding underneath a gum wrapper, even though I'm rolling my eyes at that. Still nothing. I finally accept that I lost it. Next morning I go to work. I'm bummed out that I lost my wallet and took one of our spare credit cards to buy myself lunch that day. Just as a Hail Mary before I leave, I search the car one more time and even the trunk. Nope, nothing. Worth a try though. I leave for work. I go into work and take my laptop bag and go about my day. Now comes lunchtime, around noon. I leave for an hour to eat lunch. Here's where things get weird. I'm sitting in the McDonald's drive-thru, waiting for my order and to pay with my spare credit card, when I think, man, I can't believe I lost my wallet. I'm like, what a hassle. Now I have to call all the companies to cancel my cards. As I'm thinking this, I look over to my right, and there, sitting on the passenger seat, is my wallet. I just stare at it for a minute, not believing what I'm seeing. I slowly touch it as to confirm it's real. I then pick it up and open it. Yes, this is my wallet. Everything is here. I set it back and take a picture, as proof I'm not crazy and it's really there. After a very brief period of happiness and relief, fear and confusion set in. How is this possible, I thought. I searched the car numerous times and even had my wife search it too. For it to be sitting out in the open on the passenger seat is next to impossible. That would be the first place any pair of eyes would scan. If I was stuck in some obscure spot, I would at least be forced to second guess my ability to look properly. But not being in this spot made me know that there was no possible way two human beings would miss it. At this time, I send the picture to my wife and she happily asks me where I found it. I tell her right where it is in the picture, sitting on the passenger seat with nothing else in sight around it. She says that's impossible. I tell her I'm not lying. I text my friend about this and say this is insulting to my intelligence at this point, as if I'm being mocked by the simulation. I would just accept this and move on. I'm like, are you kidding me? I spent the next few days thinking about it, but at the end, I said what I can. Life moves on. I just could not accept that I searched my car 5+ times, including once with another person, and had that person search the car alone as well. And it just shows up in like the most obvious spot that I know I looked at least 10 times, like it was never lost to begin with. I think up until now, this is the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. Case notes. So in the comments I was discussing this with another listener, and he suggested that maybe when objects go missing and reappear, it's because of shadow people, or maybe just ghosts, whatever entities that we can't see and normally interact with. They're out of phase with us, so it stands to reason that maybe they can cause other objects to go out of phase too, and then make them come back when they want. For what reason they would do this, I don't know. I mean, it could just be as simple as wanting to prank us, make us doubt our own minds, kind of gaslighting us with physical objects. Which, I'm not entirely against. It's kind of a funny prank, although I would like a sign that it's them, something that says, okay, yeah, this makes certain sense that it's them. You know what I mean? Another thought is that shadow beings are like game devs of reality. You know how in MMORPGs, you have game developers that can take form in the world. Although they can do so in weird ways. They can become creatures or giant versions of them. They can be invisible and stuff like that. Well, maybe that's what shadow beings are. Maybe they're not just humans phased out and stuck in limbo, but they're actually game devs that are, just there playing with us and having fun. As long as they don't hurt anyone, I suppose it's not a bad thing. Just a hunch. Case file number 300, written by C. Woodard123. There's the hubby, just taking out the trash. Wow, it's been 30 minutes. Where the hell is he? This happened a few months ago. My husband has been working remotely from home since the beginning of our notable world event. We live in an old farmhouse. The front door and side door are both located in the kitchen. To get in or out of the house, you have to walk through both the kitchen and living room. I woke up one morning made a cup of coffee, and sat on the edge of the couch to watch the news and weather. Husband walks out of our bedroom, past me in the living room, and into the kitchen. Turns to tell me he's going to set the trash out by the curb for pickup. He walks outside to take out the trash. A half hour goes by. I had been sitting in the same spot, waiting for him to return because I had to ask him a question about our dog's vet appointment. I realized that a half hour might seem like a while to wait for him to come back in from taking the trash out. But we have acreage, and it's not unlike him to get distracted by something else or play fetch with dogs for a little bit. I decided to call his phone to see when he was coming back inside. He answers and says he's already in his office working. Excuse me? He would have to walk directly past me again to get into his office from being outside. He definitely did not. I walked back to his office and there he was, typing away on his computer. He asked me where I had gone and says I wasn't in the living room, where I had been sitting drinking my coffee the entire time, when he came back in from taking out the trash. I've gone over this probably a million times in my head, and there is no explanation for what happened other than a glitch or something like that. Case file number 301, written by Scarlet River. It's just a wall. It's not that important. Only walls aren't supposed to vanish overnight. Back when I lived with my dad, I was 17. I woke up one morning. It was a school day. I remember going downstairs, not feeling any different than usual. I walked into the living room and realized I could see my dad in the kitchen as I stood at the end of the stairs. I stood there and just stared until my dad joked if I needed a stronger glasses prescription again. He said that joke a lot if he saw me squinting or really focusing on something. I walked up to him and just said, "Where's the wall?" He asked me what wall, and I went over to where the wall was, which was an empty space now. He started laughing and asking what I was on about. I got so frustrated because how else am I supposed to explain that there was a wall and now it's gone? My dad genuinely thought I had some sort of fever and delusions because I was so convinced there was a wall separating the living room and kitchen. I did probably sound very kooky. But I eventually shut up about it and told my dad I was just playing a joke on him, as he was growing more confused. But yeah, there was definitely a wall there. I remember it especially because it had such vivid, horrible paint color on it that my dad chose it as an accent wall. It also had a big mirror on the living room side of it. The mirror was against a different wall when I came downstairs that morning. Case file number 302, written by Some Communication 3. Pop 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 goes the popcorn. Now the stove is off, but I never turned it off. And how is not a single kernel burnt? Not 5 minutes ago, this happened. I am stumped. I popped popcorn in the stove, in one of those Cuisinart pans with a glass-topped cover, just for reference. I have a standard gas stove, home original, so it's about 30 years old. So I put in the oil and kernels, added some butter and salt, cranked up the heat to medium-high. I wait about 5 minutes or so, and the kernels are just starting to pop. This means that I've got about 2 minutes before I've got to start emptying the pan as things go quickly. My idiot ass leaves the room at this time, and I go talk to my wife who is in the computer room. I brain fart and completely forget about the popcorn for about 7 minutes, I'd estimate. I start to walk out of the office and remember the popcorn. Oh shit, I think. I rushed into the kitchen, expecting burnt to shit popcorn. Popped all over the stove and kitchen. What do I find? I find that the pan and top are completely packed full. Next to none of the kernels are burnt. Not a single kernel spilled over. And the kicker. The gas stove is off. Neither my wife nor I left the office. I have young kids who don't use the appliances. What the actual hell is going on? Bonus file, written by Dismal Queer. Hello, I say. Only, what am I? My partner and I moved into our house earlier this year. It's our first home together, and we are absolutely delighted. Around a month in, I began hearing noises. Nothing too much. Little things like hearing movement in the kitchen when I was in the lounge or hearing footsteps upstairs. Things I could put down to the house settling in, or maybe sounds from the next door neighbor. These noises continued, and I never mentioned anything to my partner until one night we were watching TV when out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone in a bright red jumper walk from the cupboard under the stairs into the kitchen. I went in to check if we had an intruder to find no one there, and the back door was locked. My partner double-checked around the house to no avail, and we put this down to me being tired. My partner is a skeptic. A month after that, my partner and I were watching a YouTube video on the TV and decided we wanted to go and look in the loft to find some DVDs. We both went upstairs after pausing the video, and when we came back down, the YouTube video was no longer on the screen and someone had searched "Hellooo" in the search bar. Nobody else was in the house. The doors and windows were locked, and it was connected to my partner's YouTube account that is only signed in on the TV and his phone, which was also downstairs. After that, my partner had told me that he had also been seeing things out of the corner of his eye and hearing noises, but he didn't want to tell me because he thought he was making it up. Whatever the explanation, it's been a bit unnerving to say the least. Case file number 303, written by Stupid Balloon. My cat is driving us crazy. She needs a timeout. Let's put her in the basement. Wait a second. How did she get out? This happened maybe 20 years ago, and I didn't even think about it until I found this sub. When I was little, I had a cat, and we had this miniature window in the kitchen that opened up in our backyard. It was a low window that was kind of awkward, and my cat loved sitting in it, especially when it was summer. Sometimes she would even use it as a door to go in and out of the house. One weekend we were having a party. I believe it was my birthday party, and we had loads of people in the backyard, and my mom had that miniature window open because it was perfect access from the kitchen to the table in the yard, so we passed food from there often. The cat was getting in the way, and she kept jumping in the window when we were trying to pass stuff through it. My mom got pissed and told me to go lock the cat up in the basement for now. We had one of those sliding doors for the basement. I put her in there and locked it and went back outside. I then hear my mom yelling, "I told you to lock up the cat! She's getting in the way again!" I got super confused and ran inside and checked the basement door, and it was locked. And the cat was in the kitchen? I don't know how to explain that one at all. It happened within minutes. Nobody was inside to open the basement. It was just my mom in the kitchen, and she was busy with food. First time I thought about this in a long time. Case file number 304, written by Succulent Baby. A ring of importance, only it vanishes from our very finger, like an accidental magician's trick. After this happened, I had to search for something so I could try to explain what just happened to me. About 2 hours ago, I arrived home from a trip to see my mother. During the trip, I bought a ring at a small shop. I was super excited because I had bought another ring on my birthday just a few weeks ago, and they complemented each other perfectly. After I got settled, I pulled my rings out of my bag and put them on to admire them. I wore them for about 45 minutes, then used the restroom. I don't care if this is TMI, as it is important to the story. Washed my hands as usual, taking off each ring. I had 3 others on as well, to wash them. I was going to take off the last ring, the one I got on my birthday, to dry it with the towel hanging up next to my sink. I slid it off my finger with the towel. I felt the ring in my fingers through the cloth, and as I went to let it fall into my opposite hand, nothing fell out of the towel. I didn't see it fall. I didn't hear it hit the ground or fall in the sink. As soon as this happened, I frantically looked for it, checked the entire bathroom, places it wouldn't even be. I told my partner about this, and he helped me look for it for 30 minutes. And before you tell me it fell in the toilet, I absolutely know it did not. I saw it on my finger as I was washing my hands. I don't know where the hell it went. Maybe I had to lose a ring to gain a new one. Bonus file, written by Klutzy Novel 8991. Even through a skeptical mind, there's no denying their daughter's room is haunted. I've lived my entire life without any paranormal experiences, until I turned around 20. Me and my wife lived in old military housing built in the 1930s. For the first year, we didn't notice much. My wife would tell me every day she was seeing and hearing stuff. I would just shrug it off. Well, after my daughter was born, holy crap. Maybe some of you can help me understand what some of this means. The two most solid paranormal experiences that made me believe in ghosts. First off, my daughter's room is the worst. Every time I go in there, I get an uncomfortable feeling. It gets cold in certain spots, and the general feeling of the room is off. I usually would argue with my wife because I didn't want her sleeping in there. One night, my wife decided to let her sleep in there. I stayed up most of the night, hovering around the room, periodically checking on her. Well, around 45 minutes later, I get up next to my front door and I'm talking to my wife. I turn my head towards my daughter's room. A tiny animal, what looked like a cat, came running out of my daughter's room. I could even hear the little footsteps. It looked so damn real. I looked at my wife very confused because we didn't have any animals. I asked her, "Did you see what I just saw?" I then ran into my daughter's room and nothing. I checked in the hall where the animal would have run, but both doors leading to the kitchen and bathroom were closed. Nothing was there. I stayed up until 7 a.m. thinking about that, Googled into it, and never came across anything valuable. My second time happened just yesterday night. Me and my wife just got back from a camping trip. We got home really late and were getting my daughter ready for bed. We hadn't been back to the house for the weekend. It was around 2 a.m. when we got fully in bed. I was dozing off, my wife was dozing off, and my daughter was asleep. As soon as I was about to fall asleep, I heard 3 consecutive knocks. Not like bare hand knocks, but knuckle, high-pitched knocks. I lay there for about 5 seconds before I got up, and as soon as I stood up, my wife asked me if I had heard it too. We both thought we imagined it. I thought it was someone at the front door at 2 a.m. I checked the entire outside of my house, and the inside too. Nothing was there. The next morning, I made my wife knock on different places of the house whilst I laid in the same position in bed. The window, the front door, the kitchen door, and then our bedroom door. Everything either sounded different or too far away to hear it. It had to have been my bedroom door. Edit. Me and my wife tend to not acknowledge anything that happens in the house unless we for sure saw or heard the same thing with clarity. We aren't scared of it by any means, more or less just astonished at what is happening. I have jokingly started to name the entity Steve. My daughter is back sleeping in our room, FYI. Aside from my 2 major events, the usual stuff I deal with I usually try to disprove, and my wife hates it. Banging on my daughter's walls, doors closing on their own, a draft in my daughter's room at all times, still haven't found why. Shadows and figures moving in my daughter's room. Lights and sparks also coming from my daughter's room. Bonus file. Written by Today Tomorrow 8895. Was it a crazy woman, a skinwalker, a banshee? No one knows. But one thing's clear. There's a warning in her mind. The other night I was sitting on my porch, smoking a cigarette, as I usually do late at night. I was home alone. My boyfriend was at work at the time, and I just heard really loud screaming. I look behind me and I see what looks like a woman just walking down the street, screaming at the top of her lungs, and she looked right at me. My initial thought was maybe it was just some weirdo or someone under the influence of something, but after more thought I realized that the scream didn't really sound human. It sounded like something I'd never heard before. After that, I thought maybe it was a skinwalker, but my mother informed me that chances are it was a banshee. For some quick backstory on why I think maybe she's warning me of my boyfriend's passing, is because a couple nights before the potential banshee sighting, me and my mom had very similar dreams. In my dream, my boyfriend had passed and I was trying to figure out how to cope with his passing. In my mom's dream, I was giving birth to a child and kept saying, "I need to take care of the baby. I promised their father I would," hinting at the idea that the father was dead. I don't know what I saw, but I'm hoping for maybe some insight on banshees, and anything to help me figure out what I saw. I did read online that Irish families can have their own banshee, and I'm 3rd generation American, from an Irish family, if that has any relevance. Case file number 305, written by Thrasham. You know what's even more interesting than Fruit Loops? Time loops. Tonight, I believe my brother and I somehow got into a time loop or déjà vu. Something's odd, and nothing feels right anymore. My brother, 13, and myself, 25, were in a car waiting for our family to be done at Walmart. It's about 9:40-ish. We think nothing of waiting and just talk, passing the time as my brother tells me about school from his 6th grade adventures, mainly about weird kids in class. Keep in mind, we are in the back seat of a truck and are in the parking lot of Walmart. Looking to the right as I'm seated on that side, I see a man wearing a dirty white shirt running with his daughter as they wail and holler and laugh. Seeing this, my brother and I both laughed because it was kind of funny to watch. On the left of the truck, on my brother's side, is a blue car. A man is parking that car but taking forever, so we go back to talking. About 2 minutes later, a group of 3 girls walk by the truck laughing and saying random banter that I can't quite remember. Something along the lines of someone being so funny. They get in the car diagonal to the truck and laugh before pulling out and leaving. My brother notices a blue car guy finally leaving as well moments later. He commented with saying, "Finally." Here's the weird part. After we talked a little bit more and laughed with each other, suddenly we heard a familiar wail. I turned to the right and it was the same dirty white shirt guy running the same path with the same daughter laughing. I said déjà vu aloud and felt a little weird. That feeling of what in the world? My brother laughed a bit thinking I was memeing till he looked and noticed the blue car guy parking again. We pay no mind thinking maybe he forgot something and go about talking again until we hear the laugh of the 3 girls. They load up and pass our windows again. Getting in the car diagonal of us, same outfits, same someone being so funny. By now, my brother and I are looking at each other. I mention it's weird, and why is that guy running the same path twice? My brother says maybe he forgot something in the store. We shake it off and I look at my dying phone at 2% charge, and we note the time, 9:50. My phone dies trying to load up YouTube, and we laugh and talk. My brother takes his switch after some time and notes the time is still 9:50. We were talking for at least a good 5 minutes. We think it's weird getting a little nervous, but distract each other with jokes. About what feels like 2 to 3 minutes later, the same white shirt guy and daughter run out of the store wailing and laughing, exactly as they did before. We see it and now we're worried. Turn to the left and the blue car is still parking. My brother comments, "Maybe we are in a time loop like you said." Then the girls come out and go to their car again. This time we do something different. We watch this white shirt guy load up his daughter in his van and talk to the driver for a bit before getting in and pulling out. I was curious to see if they actually left this time. The girls leave next, and finally, the blue car. My brother states, if it happens again, we go to the store. We feel like it's been ages waiting to see our family leave the store and come to the car. They don't believe us. Only our father does, who likes to read about theories. And then we make note of the time, 9:55 p.m. How did all that happen in what felt like at least 20 minutes, but happened in only 5? How did we see the same people 3 times, doing the same thing 3 times? We aren't tired, and we both witnessed the same events and are both in agreement. Our family says they felt strange in the store, but left it at that. What happened to us? It's been on my mind. Were we in a time loop? Case notes. I've always been enamored at the idea of a time loop. From the first time I saw the episode in Stargate SG-1, where O'Neill is stuck in a time loop. He gets to relive the same day over and over again like Groundhog Day, but he does remember everything that happened. Eventually this does lead to insanity, but until that point, you get to test out everything you've ever wanted to do, everything you've ever wanted to say. Now why this happened to you, I can't say. For O'Neill, it took a Stargate and someone that wasn't quite right in their mind with a special device. I don't think that happened to you. Whatever it was, I don't think it was intentional. Case file number 306. Written by Utopist Dreamer. When the simulation blinks. This happened to me a few days ago. I was sober, just to mention that up front. I was preparing some food while listening to an audiobook on a Bluetooth speaker. Suddenly I noticed this weird thing. It's the visual effect of a blink, but I'm 100% sure I didn't blink. because I had done that just like a second prior on purpose, because I was cutting carrots and didn't want to cut my fingers. Also, I was trying to be mindful while cutting the carrots while listening to the audiobook, and it didn't feel like a physical blink. There was another weird thing that happened slightly after the blink event. After the blink, I was thinking, well, that was different. And then I noticed it's silent. And then the audiobook continues coming out of the Bluetooth speaker, and I'm like, huh? It was as if someone had paused reality for maintenance or something, and then resumed it, but then forgot to hit continue on the audiobook. The delay was less than a second, I think, but noticeable. I immediately Googled what it was and found nothing. Well, I did find a Reddit post that was on the subreddit where someone else had experienced a similar blink type of deal, but there wasn't much info on what it might be, so I thought I'd make a post about it. Anyone know what this is about? Any logical explanation on what the duck happened? Case notes. So yeah, just to note that this sounds exactly like many other cases I've had where people attribute it to like the sun blinking out, but it only lasts like a half second to a second. And it seems to be isolated to a very small geographic area. Like everyone in a car will be affected, but those out of it will not be. I don't know what causes this. The best theory is that, as you say, it's like the simulation wasn't loading correctly. But it does correct itself extremely quickly, within a second. And it isn't just the sun, because, as you say, it's even the audio effects. Everything goes dead silent for just those few milliseconds. Bonus file. Written by Wild Hobbits, your local theater ghost. His name is Tom. For a bit of context, this happened years ago, back when I worked at my local theater. Being locally owned, it wasn't and still isn't nearly as big as your big corporation theaters like AMC, but it still had 10 different screens, mostly with stadium-style seating, but some with recliners as well. It is pretty well maintained and updated too. It's not an old or dingy feeling at all. I've never been super gung-ho on believing the paranormal, but I've never straight up denied it either. Most of my family is the same way, but my mom is pretty into that kind of thing. Also noteworthy, my older sister had worked at the same theater a few years before me. At the point I encountered the ghost, I had only been working there a few months. I'm not a night person, so up until this point, I had never worked a closing shift. I know, stereotypical, spooky night shift kind of stuff, but it just so happened to work out like that. Either way, it was probably around 11:30 p.m., and Theater 6, being at the back of the main hallway, had just let out its final showing for the night. My manager asked if I could clean it well, and take out the trash so it was good to go in the morning. Of course, that was my job, so I did. I walked into the theater with my broom and dustpan, and started sweeping up the loose popcorn, straw papers, the usual. I worked up the first few row of seats, nothing unusual. But then, as I hit the third or fourth row, I saw a black figure of what looked like a man watching me from the top right section of the theater. At first, I thought maybe I was so absorbed staring under the seats for trash that I somehow didn't notice that someone hadn't left the theater yet. But as soon as I looked up there was nothing there but empty seats. I was a little weirded out, but chalked it up to me being a bit tired from working a bit later than I'm used to, and kept going. Soon after, I reached the first 2 rows of premium seats, being the recliners. We had to wash those off with a wet rag, so they are a bit more time-consuming to clean. As I'm bent over one of these recliners, scrubbing some gunk off of it, I once more see a black figure, but this time it is much closer and walks directly behind me. Just then, I feel a tap on my shoulder, like somebody is trying to get my attention. Once again, I reason that maybe my manager walked in and needs something, so I turn around and audibly ask if they need something, only to once again be met with an empty room behind me. Now I'm starting to think something weird is up, and I didn't like it. Now that fear is set in, I can't stop feeling of chills go down my spine like crazy, and I'm always scanning the room for activity. I'm pretty much running down the rows of seats, and only stopping if I see a very obvious mess. I do the exact same thing with the second row of recliners at the top of the theater, almost entirely foregoing washing them down. As I'm cleaning in the top row, I once again see the figure behind me, since I'm standing only about 2 rows directly above where I saw it the first time. It wasn't a particularly threatening figure in retrospect. The worst it ever did was tap on my shoulder. but it was late and I was tired, and I didn't have the time nor energy to deal with a needy ghost. As such, I booked it down the left set of stairs, grabbed the trash can, and ran out of the theater. I said nothing about this to any of my coworkers or managers, mostly because I didn't want to sound crazy. However, after going home, I told my mom about the situation, and her being paranormally intrigued, for lack of a better term. She was quite into the story, and then told me, "I think your sister said that one of the theaters is haunted before. You'll have to tell her this." At this time, my sister was home from college, so I went and told her the story, at which point she looks at me with a clearly surprised expression and asks me, "You mean none of the managers ever told you the story of how Theater 6 is haunted?" At which point I told her, obviously not. I nearly just shat myself cleaning that theater, thinking I was losing my mind. So to wrap up, after talking to the oldest of my managers, she informed me that an old man died of a heart attack in Theater 6 while watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre many moons before, and apparently his name was Tom. It just so happens that workers find that the trash can in that theater loves to fall over randomly, even while they are present in the theater. And it seems like I'm the lucky employee who had the pleasure of actually meeting Tom. It took some courage to go into that theater alone again after that incident, but I actually started to enjoy it after a while, and would always try to ask Tom how his day was, if he liked seeing the same movie 30 times over, and that kind of thing in the hopes that maybe I would meet him again. Whether it'd be a good thing or not, I never did. Case file number 307, written by Unidentified OP. A simple matter-of-the-fact workplace time loss. So it's my second day there, but I have found the basic needed facilities like the toilet, staircase, lift, emergency exits, and so on. For the level I'm on, the toilet is one way, so there's a corner you turn to get to the toilets. At this corner, there's a camera that points away from the doors. Thus, if you have to go to the toilet, you would naturally pass by the camera twice. I go to the office, set down my things, and went to use the toilet, and headed back to the office where I saw my supervisor and the other person I'm supposed to be shadowing. The rest of the people on the team were also standing over my stuff, talking and looking concerned. When I entered, one of my friends, who was also an intern at that place, saw me and honestly said, "She's back," with so much relief. I looked very confused and said I just went to the toilet. My supervisor just said, "You were in the toilet for 2 hours?" What? No, I was there for 10 minutes max. Then where have you been? We all thought you were missing. What? I just got here and went to the toilet. Did no one go to check the toilet? We did, but no one was inside. What? Well, at least you're okay. Back to work. I was still confused, but brushed it off. During some free time in between tasks, I went to see the security officer and asked to see the camera footage of the toilet on my level. He showed me and saw I had only passed the camera 2 times, and in between them, I saw one of my colleagues going into the toilet and coming out a few minutes apart. I thanked the officer and went about my work. So yeah, I disappeared for 2 hours in my workplace toilet that has only one entrance and one exit, with security cameras. Edit. There are so many comments saying if this was the first time. Sadly, this isn't the first time. It happens almost once every semester on campus. The longest I disappeared for is like 8 to 10 hours. I have had medical screenings done and psychological evaluations, but everything seems normal. The toilet also had those with 3 stalls, but my coworker swears she opened all 3. Edit 2. Thanks for the awards. People have asked for more detail about the camera footage, so I'm not able to get a physical copy of it due to actual security issues, but here are some details about it. The video is timestamped with the time and hours it has been recording for. I went in at about 8 hours and 34 minutes and came out at 10 hours 30 minutes. My colleague went in at 9 hours 1 minute and came out at 9 hours 8 minutes. The camera caught both of us going in and coming out. I did ask if they could check the rest of the cameras along the corridor from the toilet. They did, and it all showed I was missing for 2 hours. I specifically checked the camera in front of the office door that looks partially into the office and the corridors outside. The camera did see me walking through the corridor to the toilet, and back from the toilet later. The only thing odd was that the camera had shifted a bit for a few seconds to a minute, like it kinda glitched out kind of thing. It was at the 9-hour 12 minutes mark. But there was no way I could have exited the toilet and walked back to it without the other camera at the office door catching me. Or for the fact that I could have gone out past the officer or walked around and went back into the toilet in about a minute. Case file number 308, written by AK Blue Eyes. The neighbors there, but whoever it was morphed into them. This happened last summer. A complete stranger knocked on my door and started talking to me like they knew me. I had no idea who it was, but something told me to play like I knew them. I looked down at their shoes. I recognized the shoes and leggings of my next door neighbor. The voice was theirs. I looked up and their faces morphed into my neighbor's faces. I said I had a headache and went back inside. I started crying. I thought I lost my mind. I went to my doctor. She said, "Oh, you had an atypical migraine. It happens." Okay. My husband came home from working out of town. The neighbor comes over and says hi. My husband kinda acted rude. As soon as she left, he looked at me and said, "Who the F is that?" I said, "It's a neighbor." He said, "Oh." That was kind of the end of the conversation. I can't stop thinking about it though. We lived next to her for 3 years. What could have happened? Case file number 309, written by Australian Shepherds. An intersection in space and time. I'm not really sure how to describe this story in a way that makes sense. I, 20 female, was 19 at the time. I had just gotten off work and left my office to pick up my boyfriend at the time. We both worked the swing shift. I got off at 11:30 and him at midnight, and we had one car. Anyways, I had just gotten off the highway and was turning onto the street his office was on. About a quarter mile down that road, there was an intersection and the light was red. It was also filled with smoke, and there were some boys standing in the intersection. I think they were crossing a street. The intersection also had a high school campus on it, and the football field was directly next to the street. As I pulled up to the intersection, I slowed down and stopped way earlier than I needed to, because the scene was weird. I could see more people standing in the smoke and some boys in the football field. Then, a loud, dusty old sedan drove through the intersection, on red, and sped off in the direction I was headed. People started getting out of the cars and running down the street towards me. The van in front of me was slowly backing up too. I noped out of there, made a U-turn in the middle of the street and drove back towards the highway. As I drove away, I started to hear gunshots. I called my then boyfriend to tell him it was going to take me longer to pick him up. I told him what happened and I was pretty panicked. I picked him up and we went home. At home, I looked up the news and checked it for days. I never saw a thing. I also looked up the intersection to see if any news would pop up, and Google Maps said there was a gas station and a Walgreens. I did some more research. The high school I had seen hadn't existed in 40 years. The next night, when I was driving to pick up my boyfriend, I paid attention to the intersection. No high school. Bonus file, written by No Name Maddox. Little People in the Woods. I'm not sure if this is the right place for my experience, but the post here jogged an old hidden memory from my childhood that I now need to get off my chest. In 1999, I was 7 years old, playing in the woods with my friend Charlotte. We were standing at each end of a big log in the woods when I noticed movement in my peripherals. I tried focusing my periphery to catch a detailed look. I see similar movement often when we're in the woods, and always disappears, more like scatters, before I turn to look. My heart skipped a beat when I could make out a group of little people looking up at me as well. I was frozen in the pose I was playing in. After a few seconds, I realized Charlotte had stopped narrating our play and was frozen in place as well, staring at me but focusing on them. I'm pretty sure they were dressed because it didn't look like they were all naked. I could tell they knew we were aware of them, and they dispersed as Charlotte moved her eyes. We didn't talk about it until we were in her house. We weren't afraid exactly, just confused on our walk home. We wrote about what we saw before talking about it, to see if we saw the same thing. Unfortunately, both our descriptions were so vague, but clothed, less than a foot for sure. One thing we were positive of was to mind our business and not go searching, which is what our instinct would have usually been. Duh. We thought we found a colony of little people in the woods, but the fact that our reaction was to quietly leave and not even talk about it behind closed doors, and still not even talk out loud about it but write it out. I don't remember being too frightened. In fact, we kinda just accepted it and moved on, with a new taste of what this world and universe is capable of. I watched The Indian in the Cupboard later in life, which reminded me of these little people, but I no longer saw them by then. Charlotte and I would talk about seeing things out of the corner of our eyes, but could never figure out what it was. Although Charlotte was different. Her and her dad were huge hippies. Tire swing in the kitchen, no TV type. And her imagination was so wildly magnificent that it made my mind radiate. I always thought that maybe her narration of our play was so powerful and energetic that we could manifest and see the same thing. Little people were never playing any parts in either of our imaginations though. In fact, when we both confirmed what each other saw, we were kind of in awe that we've never even dreamt of tiny people in this universe. Case notes. So your suggestion that perhaps your own imagination manifested these beings into existence? It's an interesting concept. If I go back to just raw science as we understand it now, to manifest anything in the universe is possible. It's simply a matter of converting energy to matter. A matter of. But the issue with this is it takes an enormous amount of energy. I mean, that's the whole thing with splitting the atom and creating nuclear energy. There's so much energy reserved in just the bonds of atoms. The energy in them is immense. So if you had enough energy to create little people from nothing, it wouldn't really fit in this universe as we understand it. Maybe there's something else. Maybe your imaginations were able to pull them from another universe, so you're not creating them, you'd just be transferring them from another parallel universe. We have no idea how much energy that takes or how it even works, but maybe.